School Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Mean of Revolution. And Trump embraces terrorist leader at the White House on the Marines' 250th birthday. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. Hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Revolution is a way of life. Revolution is for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I got some revolutionary lunch for y'all. Let's get into the content. Terrorists embraced at the U.S. White House. Salute. What a disgrace. Salute to our veterans on Veterans Day.
Well, today is the 250th birthday of the United States Marine Corps. Happy birthday, United States Marines. And what better way to celebrate all of their sacrifice than by inviting a wanted terrorist to the White House to meet with President Trump? Where are all the pro-Zionist, pro-Israel shills who always warn us about Islamists infiltrating our country? Here he is. Here's the $10 million reward for Giuliani. I don't see Ben Shapiro complaining about all of this. I don't see all the guys that are like, how can we allow these Islamists in our country? There's cells all over the place right now, but we just invite one of them to the White House? Okay. I don't see Mark Levin complaining about it. Here's a guy who literally has a $10 million bounty on his head from our government for being a terrorist, killing Christians, Alawites, Druze, etc., children. And he's at the White House because he's our new puppet leader of Syria. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene posted this a short time ago. She said, the new leader of Syria is a former al-Qaeda terrorist wanted by our government who is meeting with the President Trump today at the White House on the U.S. Marines' 250th anniversary. He rose to power in December 2024. Sanctions were lifted off of Syria in June, and many Christians and minority groups have been killed before and after sanctions were lifted. Syria is the oldest home of Christianity outside of Israel. The Apostle Paul met Jesus on the road to Damascus. I pray the persecution ends not only in Syria, but all around the world. Now look at this. He arrived by the back door of the White House. They wouldn't even bring him in the front. So they arrived by the back door of the White House, and some cameras were able to capture him getting out of the SUV there. But normally he would come in the front. They would have like the color guard would be welcoming him, praising him. Maybe there even be some music playing. Nothing. They brought him in through the back door.
Look, they know he al-Qaeda.
Like a little rat. Then when he's inside meeting with Congressman Brian Mast and others, here's some photos inside. Congressman Brian Mast, who you may recall, of course.
Now, the most ironic part about this picture, this dude right here lost his legs in Iraq fighting against Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Yeah, this dude right here, the one who blew his legs off. This is their leader. But this Israeli shield, they don't care because he was doing their bidding.
Brian Mast, who you may recall, of course, formerly wearing an IDF shirt, walking around the halls of Congress in an Israeli IDF shirt. Friend of the show, Kevork Almassian, one of the great journalists in the world, posted this a short time ago. If you still can't see what's happening between Giuliani and the U.S. and Israel after this photo shoot with Brian Mast, then honestly, even God himself won't be able to save you. He's right about that. We invited Syrian journalist Kevork Almassian on the show to talk about all of this. Kevork, great to see you as always, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, Clayton.
This is a really dark day. I mean, it's, just on the one hand, on the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Marines and U.S. soldiers who sacrificed their lives, who were sold a bill of goods about why they were going to fight these guys in the Middle East. And here we're welcoming one of their leaders right into the White House to, get some nice food and hang out with the President of the United States. It's a really dark day.
Well, Clayton, I have friends in the United States who served in Iraq twice under the banner of fighting against terrorism. They went into Afghanistan. They came back physically and mentally injured. They are still suffering from PTSD. And I can see their activism nowadays on social media platforms. And I don't want to put myself in their shoes, but if I were in their shoes, I would feel betrayed by the officials and the politicians and the planners in the United States. Because from the early days of the war against Syria, and why I call it a war against Syria, because this was an orchestrated and engineered CIA regime change war against Syria. And in 2012, it was quite clear from the emails of Hillary Clinton when Jake Sullivan sent an email to Hillary Clinton saying, Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. And then the Defense Intelligence Agency of the United States sent a report to Barack Obama telling him that the driving force behind the insurgency against Assad are Al-Qaeda in Iraq, are the jihadists, the Salafists, and the Muslim Brotherhood. And knowing that, Obama put his signature on Operation Timber Sycamore, meaning he gave the permission for the CIA to arm and train these multinational Takfiri jihadists in the country. And the outcome of this regime change war was basically that Jolani, who was the founder of the Al-Qaeda offshoot in Syria, is now the de facto president of the country. But he selected himself, or probably the CIA and the MI6 selected him to lead this the transitional period in the country, because they needed someone who could do a few things, one of which is to strike strategic agreements and with neighboring countries, especially with Israel, meaning that he wants to give up on the Golan Heights and on Mount Hermon, those are Syrian territories, for Israel in exchange for a security deal with the Israelis. He will also open the markets, of course, for all the multinational corporations, and he will get a loan from the IMF. Today also he met with the head of the IMF. And accordingly, this means that the Syrian economy will turn into a privatized franchise for the multinational corporations and these loans that they will give to Syria, which means after Jolani, whoever comes, the Syrian economy will be hostage for these loans and Syria will be forever in debt. And that means whoever comes next will continue revolving in the orbit of the planners in the United States.
This is a great point, because, I mean, this is very similar to what's happening in Ukraine, right? So Ukraine is now a vassal state. I mean, all of these multinational corporations basically own Ukraine, right? No one really owns you. The Ukrainian people don't own that country anymore. It's been sold off as part of all of these IMF loans, World Bank loans, etc. They will forever be indebted to these multinationals. We'll give you minerals, et cetera, for the rest of eternity. Well, I think the United Kingdom just paid off their loans to the United States for our involvement in World War II. Like, that's how long it took to pay back these monies. So this turns Syria basically into what? Into like a vassal state of these multinational corporations who just will have mineral rights to Syria, basically?
Just for context, just 1 year before the war, Syria had $7 billion external debt. That was around 12% of the total GDP, which was around 60 billion USD. But most of this debt was from the days of the Soviet Union, and nobody was asking Syria to pay this debt. So practically, Syria had zero foreign debt to the outside world. And that was really problematic in the region, because the Syria's GDP was increasing exponentially during the 2005 and 2010, and its economy was growing, but based on a national economy, which means the Syrians were working and Syrians were producing and Syrians were exporting. But in a globalized world nowadays, especially that it is not allowed any longer for countries to enjoy a certain level of sovereignty, especially on their economic sector. This meant that they had to destroy the Syrian economy and suck the country dry. And now the corporations take over the reconstruction of the country. You're talking about $200 to $300 billion investments in the country. And that's why one of the conditions that the US and Britain were telling to Jolani, that he cannot allow for the Chinese companies to come to Syria, and one of which are the telecommunication companies, right? And the other thing is that the Americans are going to establish bases in the country. Now, they have agreed to build or to have a military presence in Damascus, because the Americans want to follow up on a potential anticipated security deal with Israel. Now, this is a very important point, Clayton, because I've seen, for example, Laura Loomer was showing some anger that Donald Trump received Jolani. And I think this is a very fake outrage, because if
thank you for saying that, by the way, because I saw her saying this. She's like, I'm upset this terrorist coming to this guy Jolani's coming to the White House, but it's why do you think it's fake?
Because first of all, she doesn't mention at all the direct role of Netanyahu and his government in overthrowing the previous regime in Syria.
Bingo.
And allowing Jolani to come and take over Damascus. Jolani basically cruised from Aleppo to Damascus, 400 kilometers on the highway, and nobody stopped him. Meanwhile, all the air forces were in the skies of Syria. If Israel wanted to eliminate Jolani, if Israel saw Jolani a threat to its national security, they would have eliminated him. Remember, in the past 2 years, they killed the entire leadership of Hezbollah because they presented and posed a threat to Israel. They killed the leadership of Hamas, even inside Iran, because they posed a threat for Israel. But they don't see Jolani as a threat, because from the beginning, whatever happened in the Buqa camp in Iraq, this is a very big question mark, because nowadays, the former head of CIA, who is leading the CENTCOM nowadays, he's playing basketball with Jolani in Damascus, but Jolani ended up in the same Buqa camp in Iraq when the head of CENTCOM back then was the head of the CIA. So there are lots of questions if they groomed Jolani in Iraq and then they sent him to Syria to lead this insurgency against Assad, because from the beginning, I mean, Clayton, who is going to fight against the secular regime? Do you think the leftists will say, I'm going to wear a suicide vest for Marx or for Lenin, or some secular person is going to drive a suicide car or a car bomb and blow up itself? No, those are the Takfiri jihadists who will carry out this type of fighting against a secular regime because they see it an infidel regime. So they took the opportunity, and in the words of Hillary Clinton, if you remember, she said about the Afghanistan war, we had a brilliant idea, and that idea was arming these jihadists back then in Afghanistan. So they copied the same strategy in Syria. They armed these jihadists, and now they reached to power. And once they reach to power, they're showing goodwill to the U.S., to their basically handlers in the U.S. and in Israel. But there is one small, in my opinion, disagreement, or there is a rift, it seems, in the U.S. administration nowadays, how to deal with Jolani in the future. Some voices in the U.S. administration, like Tom Barak, continue saying that everything should be in the hands of Jolani. One centralized regime, Jolani controls everything. And this is the wish of Qatar, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia. But Israel has a different approach. Israel wants for Jolani to continue leading certain parts of Syria, and those are in Aleppo, Idlib, Hama Homs, and Damascus. But beyond Damascus, in the south, they want a demilitarized zone, so Jolani cannot move his forces to the south of Damascus. And they want to present themselves as the protector of the minorities in Syria after Jolani unleashed his genocidal army against the minorities. And that's why Laura Loomer was in Israel meeting with minority groups in Israel and saying that we cannot live with Jolani because in the strategic thinking of Israel, they want for Jolani to control the Sunni-dominated regions, but the regions which are not dominated by the Sunnis, they want to have certain leverage over them, and especially over Asweda, where the Druze live, and in the eastern shore of the Euphrates, where the Kurds live, and also over the Alawites. So Laura Loomer basically is doing Israel's job nowadays in Israel. And she didn't go to Syria and ask what the Syrian people want. She went to Israel reporting about the Jolani meeting with Trump. And I find that really dishonest by her, because if she was honest, she should mention, for example, that the soldiers and the militants of the Jolani army, they used to go to Israel and receive medical treatment in the Israeli field hospitals. And the former head of Mossad confessed that on Al Jazeera, that yes, we receive them and we give them medical treatment out of humanitarian reasons, right? Because he says that Al-Qaeda has never attacked Israel in the past. And I'm not calling at all for violence or calling for Al-Qaeda attack against Israel, but it's a question mark, right? Al-Qaeda attacked everyone in the region except for Israel. Why is that? That's a big question mark. Why Al-Qaeda never attacked? And I'm not calling for attack, so nobody would understand me wrong.
Did you know that the U.S. life expectancy peaked at 78 years old back in 2014? Yeah, it's been going down ever since. Global life expectancy declining for the first time in 30 years. one, and our friends at Brightcore for supporting the show. No, but you bring up a great point. And one of the questions I had was really, why do you think that none of the pro-Israel voices, the neocon pro-Israel voices, the same people who lecture us daily about, Islamic terrorists invading the United States, like, I haven't said a word about this. They seem to be pretty quiet about this. And yet when we call, we're calling out the Christian. I mean, you're born in Syria. You're a Christian. As we talked about in the intro, one of the strongest Christian countries in the world, until it's overrun by by people killing Christians and Alawites and Druze and everything else. So why have they been so quiet on this point, do you think?
Clayton, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I've been thinking, and I was really all the time shocked why American politicians, European politicians stood on the wrong side in Syria. I was always asking myself, where is the Vatican, for example? Where are the churches in the world? Why aren't they saying something about this? Where are the leaders in the US? And I come to the realization that they are anti-Christian forces. There are anti-Christian forces. They are planning on eliminating the Christian presence in the Middle East, especially that those Christians do not align with the Christian Zionism, the ideology that they have created among the evangelicals in the United States in order to sell the illusion that there is this Judeo-Christian alliance and that we have to stand with the state of Israel for us to be blessed. Like for God to accept us, we have to bless Netanyahu. We have to bless Ben-Gvir. And that's a heresy. That's a wrong perception of Christianity. So they ethnically cleansed basically 90% of the Christians in Iraq and in Syria and also from Palestine. And they are normalizing the Christian Zionism among also whoever is left in Syria, because these people nowadays are very vulnerable and they need anyone to come and save them. Imagine that Jolani attacks a town, and this town is a Christian town, and he's capable of completely genociding them. And then Israel comes and says, I'm your savior, I'm going to protect you. And at gunpoint, many people choose to be with Israel. And this is what happened, including buying many influencers. I know it myself because I was approached by an Israeli who claims to be a private person after the regime change happened. And he said, look, the regime change is done. You were fighting to keep this regime, and this regime is gone, and we have now a mutual enemy. Let's cooperate, and we will support your work on Syrian analysis, and you will become very influential on social media platforms. They offered me personally. So, and I know
Israel came to you and said, now
the Israeli person came to me and he said that he is a very rich Israeli person who has lots of companies, and he offered me support for my channel, Syrian Analysis.
To support Jolani.
No, to support the idea that Israel has to be the protector of the minorities in Syria, so that I would be normalizing Israel presenting itself as this protector of the minorities in Syria. Because I'm influential on X and I have a big following, and many Syrian Christians, for example, also watch my content and follow what I write on X. So they wanted to capitalize and invest in my work.
So in other words, as an Orthodox Christian, maybe we should convert to a form of sort of Christian Zionism now, because Israel is my protector. And here's Kevork out on social media. He's really pushing this idea, maybe I should start to think about supporting Christian Zionism. Like, it's unbelievable.
I was invited to Israel by him. He said, when you come to Israel, you will see that the situation is not like you think it is. And I know he says that you're not an anti-Semite, so we would accept you. So the only thing that he wants is to tone down my criticism of Israel. And my criticism of Israel comes based on my perception that Israel is wrong on collectively punishing everyone for October 7, for example, in Gaza, despite my differences and disagreements with many of the groups fighting against Israel. And I think that the trigger for the regime change war in Syria was not by the US itself, but by the neocons and the Zionists in the United States convincing the planners in the US that this regime change war has to happen and then we have to balkanize the country. Syria. And this is what is happening, ongoing as we speak nowadays. I ask many people, including a former Marine veteran who is also a regular guest on your channel, Scott Ritter, for example. He says, I can't think of anything else but Israel. Israel is the reason why they started this war, because Syria posed a threat for the dominance of Israel in the region, and it was aligning itself with Iran and other actors in the region who used to pose economic and security threat or challenge, let's say, for the absolute Israeli dominance over the region. But once the regime change war happened, I think now the region is mostly revolving around Israel, and everybody is running after normalizing ties with Israel. It's the Abraham Accords, and it's only a matter of time until Jolani also joins the Abraham Accords. But there are steps, they have to first strike a security deal, and then you will see, for example, does anyone in the United States thinks that this congressman who received Jolani, his name is Brian Mast, like Brian Mast is beyond Israel first, right? He wears an IDF uniform inside Congress. Like, is there anyone who thinks that Israel would object the visit of Jolani to the United States? And if the Israelis objected his visit to the United States, would Brian Mast receive him? That's impossible. So I think Jolani has already presented his cards that he's ready to join the Abraham Accords, and it's only a matter of time until Syria becomes its entirety revolving under the American umbrella. And this was, unfortunately, an outcome that many people wanted to avoid. Not that we don't want relationship with the United States, in the contrary, but we want friendly relationship with the United States and not the master and slave relationship. We wanted to preserve the sovereignty of the United States and keep good relationship with the US and with the other regional and international powers. We don't have any problem with the United States. The United States is 10,000 kilometers away from us. People think that the Middle Eastern people hate the United States. No. I grew up on American pop music, on hip-hop music. I watched Hollywood movies. I have never had any bad sentiments toward American culture or American products, right? But we wanted to preserve our dignity. We wanted to stay in our homes. We wanted to preserve our national economy, and everything is gone nowadays. So unfortunately, it's like the WEF when they say you will own nothing and you will be happy, and you will see all these people celebrating in the streets the demise of their nation. It's an unfortunate truth, but they have propagandized the people so much that they think now they are free. But I think that they have put the chain in the neck of Jolani and Syria, especially with this IMF now deal. And whoever comes next in Syria, they will be forever in debt. And that's the economic hitman playbook.
What does this mean? I'll get you out of here on this, Kevork. What does this mean for the so-called war on terror? I mean, was it ever about fighting terrorism at all? I mean, when we have a terrorist literally meeting with President Trump this afternoon and all the sacrifice of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, or was the idea of fighting the war on terror just an idea just for weaponizing it for the United States and Israeli interests, wiping out world leaders, regime change? What does it mean?
It was a great opportunity and an excuse for the US and the Zionists, the neocons in the US, to expand their influence in different places around the world, one of which is in Central Asia, because they wanted to establish a base in Afghanistan, and then they moved into Iraq, Syria, and they wanted to knock out Iran as well. So they wanted to establish an absolute hegemony over the region. And this is a very vital region, energy, trade routes, etc. And I think the war on terror, I don't think that most of the people who joined Al-Qaeda were assets for the CIA or any other planners in the US. They thought really that they're fighting against the US. But on the leadership level, for example, the Jolani, Baghdadi, Osama bin Laden, like, it makes no sense. Like, one of the very close trustees of Osama bin Laden, his name is Ahmed Zaidan, and they used to have pictures together in Tora Bora and in Afghanistan. Now he's the advisor of Jolani. And Jolani was the leader of Al-Qaeda. It's like I'm watching a dystopian movie. I'm watching a dystopian movie, and unfortunately, it makes a mockery of this war on terror.
Well, I'm surprised at how quiet everyone is. Everyone flipped out about Mamdani becoming the new mayor of New York, a mayor of New York City. And I saw all of these like MAGA influencers all saying this is the biggest slap in the face to the families of 9/11, victims of 9/11, et cetera, et cetera. But they're quiet when there's literally a terrorist meeting at the White House with President Trump. They're totally quiet about that.
There is something important about Mamdani, by the way. Mamdani is a very liberal person. He's not even an Islamist, right? He goes into the LGBT demonstrations. His wife is a Syrian, and she supported this regime change operation in Syria. And once the regime change happened and the spree of killing started against the minorities, now she's silent about it. Why is that? Why are they silent about all this killing happening in Syria once the regime change happened? But you're also right about the Zionists freaking out about Mamdani. It's a joke. Why would they be afraid of Mamdani and not by Jolani? Jolani is a mastermind behind car bombs in Iraq. This guy has been planning and constructing car bombs and sending them into Shia neighborhoods in Iraq in order to start a civil war. He has lots of blood on his hands. He's soaked in blood. But I feel really sad because I'm Syrian. Seeing Jolani is a representative of my country and meeting with Trump. And unfortunately, this meeting will embolden his grip in the country, and only the people in Syria will pay the price. But Trump doesn't care about that. And whoever is advising him, they think that they can keep Jolani on a leash.
I'm trying to think what it would be like in the United States. What would be a comparable person to ascend to the presidency that you have in Syria? You have a terrorist as the president. I would think maybe Mike Pompeo, or I was thinking like somebody evil who kills people for a living. I don't know.
Like Timothy McVeigh.
Yeah, right. I don't know. It's just awful. No wonder they brought
those people in the US. Those people in the US, they just have big mouths, my friend. Like they give orders to other people to kill. Jolani himself killed people. This guy was on the ground and committing heinous acts, and now he's acting like he's a civilized person, wearing nice watches and wearing suits. And he ran on the platform of saying. He said, "Dear Mujahideen, after Damascus, we are marching to Jerusalem and we're going to liberate Palestine." And once he reached to Damascus, he went to the White House to meet with Donald Trump.
They're like, "You're not going into Palestine anywhere. No. You're our puppet. You're our puppet." Boy. Kevork, great to see you as always. Thank you for your analysis as usual. And
for the former head of Al-Qaeda. Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, November 10th, 2025. Kyle Anzalone joins us now. Kyle, it's a pleasure, my dear friend. Why the red carpet being rolled out, almost literally, for the former head in the White House for the former head of Al-Qaeda?
Yeah, Judge, this is really, really shocking. We have the new leader of Syria who now goes by Ahmed al-Shara, and that's what they'll call him today when he's with Donald Trump. But his real name is Abu Mohammed al-Jolani. That's the name he went by when he fought against U.S. troops in Iraq during the Iraq War for Al-Qaeda in Iraq. That was his name when he was in an American torture prison in Iraq, and when he was a deputy commander of the Islamic State before breaking off and actually founding the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria, the Al-Nusra Front. And he fought against the Syrian government certainly with at least the indirect help, if not the direct support of the Americans and our allies in the Middle East, like Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Qatar, and the Israelis as well. And he was able to exploit the power vacuum created by the U.S. chasing Bashar al-Assad from power in Damascus to seize power there, where his government has overseen the ethnic cleansing of ethnic massacres of minority groups in Syria, minority sets, Alawites and Druze. Really disturbing stuff. And yet he is being welcomed in the White House because he isn't an Assad and he isn't allied with Russia and Iran, and that's all they care about in Washington.
How does Israel gain, if at all, from the adulation of this character in the White House?
Well, certainly Jolani seizing power in Damascus created a real power vacuum in Syria where Bashar al-Assad was no longer backed by Russia. And so Israel was given free reign over the skies of Syria, where they bombed 800 military bases last November, just pummeled Syria with multiple strikes. And they evaded a large swath and seized a large swath of southern Syria, from the Israeli border, the Golan Heights, to now just outside the suburbs of Damascus. And so it's been a huge boon for Israel. And now you have people like the Israeli foreign minister, Gideon Saar, saying that, oh, look, Jolani and the other jihadists that he put in his administration are now an excuse for Israel to continue to attack Syria and to demand that Syria allow Israel to use Syrian airspace to bomb Iran. That's one of Israel's main demands of Syria. And so this is all about pressuring the Syrian government and incentivizing them with removing sanctions to allow Israel to retain some of their occupation in southern Syria and to be able to use Syrian territory to bomb Iran.
More from Donald Trump: Israel first, not America first. So let me get this straight. And this is the first time I've heard this, Carl. The Israelis are using the Trump administration to butter up al-Jolani, of whom there are pictures holding severed heads that he presumably did the severing. We can't show the pictures. In order to give Israel more land and airspace when it wants to attack Iran. The whole thing is done for Israel. Is that right?
Yes, and in Washington, they may mention some other issues like Jolani isn't allied with Russia in the way Assad is, and Jolani isn't as friendly with the Iranians as Assad was, or Hezbollah. But ultimately, it really is about Israel. They had the most to gain here. They're really exploiting the situation.
How long can al-Jolani last in office? I mean, live by the sword, die by the sword. He's probably got half the country loathing him. Number one. Number two, is he slaughtering Christians because they believe in Jesus Christ?
So I haven't, at least since he has rose to power in Damascus, I haven't read reports of him or his Islamists going around and slaughtering, in particular, Christians. Now, there have been some jihadists, apparently with the Islamic State, who conducted attacks against Christians in Damascus. And who knows that this is a situation where the government is looking the other way and allowing this to happen, or if they really had no role, no involvement in it at all. It does seem like they are trying to appeal to Washington and understand that they start killing Christians. That would probably be something that would really, really irritate Donald Trump in the wrong direction to go. So they've targeted other minority sets, the Alawites and the Druze, versus the Christians, who I think are just trying to keep a low profile so they don't end up getting slaughtered by the jihadists at this time. So it's really a mess. And look, if he retains and solidifies his control, then I do think the Christians had to worry more. And who knows how long he could stay in power. Turkey likes him in power. I think the Israelis like it, so they have an excuse to bomb Syria anytime they want, to make demands of Syria and to keep the Syrian government weak. Jolani is not a figure who's going to be welcomed in the global stage, and that's going to set Syria back. And that's what ultimately Israel wants, is weakened states around them, and Syria is in the weakest state they've ever been in.
One of the chatters writes in, Israel using an Al-Qaeda head-chopping Zionist puppet. 1 second, this just moved. Israel using an Al-Qaeda head-chopping Zionist puppet to do their bidding. Is anyone surprised?
Absolutely not.
Right. I mean, it's a little funny because the language is a bit humorous, but it's horrific when you think of it. And the Israeli history of slaughtering people makes one realize that we shouldn't be surprised at this. Does Turkey want this guy in there? Does Lebanon want this guy in there?
So I'm not sure about Lebanon. Turkey has backed Jolani and his militia, which he called Tahrir al-Sham, before taking power in Damascus. So I do think they feel they have a lot of influence. I'm sure Turkish intelligence is deeply embedded in the current Israeli government. The problem is the more influence Turkey has in Syria, the more Israel is going to want to exert their influence and control over Syria. So it's creating more of a conflict and tensions between Israel and Turkey at this point.
How soon do you think the Israelis will attack Iran? Is it the belief of the West that this is definitely on their schedule?
Yeah, I think at this point, Netanyahu's plans may be set back a little bit. I do think he really upset President Donald Trump when he tried to assassinate the Hamas leadership in Qatar. Importantly, failed, right? It's not just that he did something very provocative that set back Trump's negotiation peace process, that undermined Washington's relationship with Doha that's so important to Donald Trump, both personally and politically. But he failed to kill the Hamas leaders in the strikes on top of that. And there had already been some frustration expressed by Donald Trump when Netanyahu bombed Iran the first time on the eve of talks between the U.S. and Iranian officials that could have established a new nuclear agreement. So I think Netanyahu's probably delayed in his plan, but we're looking at a matter of months at this point. The Iranian government says they're not going to engage with the Americans as long as they're backing the Israelis in the Middle East. That doesn't look to change anytime soon. And the Iranians say they're going to rebuild their nuclear program even stronger than before. And both Netanyahu and Donald Trump have said that if Iran begins rebuilding its nuclear program, we're going to begin striking.
Have any Republicans been critical of Trump for hosting al-Jawlani in the White House?
Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, was once thought to be kind of just a Trump faithful, has been almost the most critical Republican of Donald Trump during this administration. And she said, "What are you doing hosting a former al-Qaeda leader on the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Marines? This is absolutely insulting."
Right, this full screen that we have up on the screen, is this what she wrote?
Yes.
All right, I will read it for the benefit of those who are receiving the show audio only. The new leader, this is from Marjorie Taylor Greene, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia. The new leader of Syria is a former al-Qaeda terrorist wanted by our government, who is meeting with President Trump today at the White House on the U.S. Marines' 250th anniversary. That's today. He rose to power in December 2024. Sanctions were lifted off Syria in June, and many Christians and minority groups have been killed before and after the sanctions were lifted. Syria is the oldest home of Christianity outside of Israel. The Apostle St. Paul met Jesus on the road to Damascus, one of the most famous parts of the New Testament. I pray the persecution ends, not only in Syria, but all around the world. However, I would really like to see nonstop meetings at the White House on domestic policy, not foreign policy, and foreign countries' leaders. Wow.
And
she has probably gotten under Trump's skin lately, but she really has been terrific on some of these issues. She's condemned Netanyahu, hasn't she?
Yeah, and I just want to add, her post actually included the State Department wanted poster for Jolani. And so, she really proves that he is a terrorist. And yeah, she has also broken with the rest of the Republicans on the Israel issue and has called Israel's atrocities in Gaza a genocide, which I think is very powerful for a Republican to say, and has been critical of the special relationship between the U.S. and Israel and tried to strip funds, that annual military aid that the U.S. gives to Israel from different legislation. So she's really been a very good voice on these issues.
Has Jelani divided MAGA, or has this Jelani visit not resonated with them?
Well, I think it was mostly flying under the radar. And, us in the independent media have been talking about it since it was announced, I think, about a week ago. But this really hadn't been brought up in Washington. Democrats aren't making a big deal out of it. And so this post from Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think, probably brought a lot more attention to this meeting than there otherwise would have been. And so I'm going to be very interested to see the reaction from MAGA now that they know this information from MTG.
Switch gears a little bit. Do you think that Trump is foolish enough to get the American military involved in a Vietnam War-like war in Venezuela?
Unfortunately, I do. Oftentimes, personnel is policy. Trump made Marco Rubio first his Secretary of State and then his National Security Advisor. And Marco Rubio is dead set on orchestrating regime changes in Latin America, not just Venezuela, but certainly Cuba would be on his list as well. But I think a lot of the southern Florida neocons really view Venezuela as key to the communist regime being able to remain in power in Cuba. And so they first want to overthrow Maduro in Venezuela. And while Trump, I think, would like to limit the U.S. military action in Venezuela, he seems to be getting suckered in more and more and more, where you've had, I believe, 20 boats destroyed in the Caribbean and the Pacific at this point, killing 76 people. Trump claims they're trafficking drugs. There may be trafficking drugs. There's unlikely to be trafficking drugs for a narco-terrorist cartel, and even less likely to be carrying fentanyl or any kind of drugs that are going to kill Americans. On top of that, this is all extrajudicial, unconstitutional killing that Trump is engaged in already. And I think he's going to ratchet it up, as is shown to be ineffective in achieving his policy goals that it simply can't achieve, because it's not really looking at the root cause of the drug problem in the United States or the migration problems in Latin and South America.
Well, here's the man who calls himself the Secretary of War in a rather embarrassing 2 or 3 lines to Pentagon civilian and military leaders just 3 days ago. Chris, cut number 4.
We're not just buying something. We're solving life and death problems for our warfighters. We're not building for peacetime. We are pivoting the Pentagon and our industrial base to a wartime footing. Building for victory should our adversaries FAFO.
Why does he talk like he's a teenager? FAAFO. We all know what that means. It's, an acronym. I'll dumb it down. Fool around and find out. He probably uses another word that starts with F. I don't want to put a word in his mouth that he didn't use, but it seems highly immature and provocative. I don't know who could sit there and listen to it other than those whose jobs depended on it.
Right. No, this is really important, that this man is not serious. He is not capable of running the U.S., I guess they call it now the Department of War, but the Pentagon. And really, he was a talk show host before he got this job, and that's where he belongs. He's very good at looking in a suit and being mostly articulate in delivering a message, but that doesn't mean that you're capable of helping to craft U.S. foreign policy. Part of the reason why I'm so concerned Trump is going to end up in a conflict in Venezuela is there's no offset to Marco Rubio in the administration. It should be the leader of the military that's standing up and saying that, look, all of my assessments say this is going to be an absolute train wreck, a quagmire. But Pete Hegseth doesn't have the cognitive capabilities to figure that out. And it's certainly not the ability to figure out how to explain that to Trump. And so Rubio is going to be in the driver's seat when it comes to foreign policy, particularly in Latin America.
What is the value judgment that Rubio makes. What animates him to hate these Latin American countries? Just because they're lefties?
Yeah, I think it's probably personal to him. I think he's of Cuban descent and wants to see regime change.
He's going to hate this if he even cares what we say. He's an anchor baby. His parents came here illegally, and he was born here. Under some of Trump's rules, we'd have to question whether he's even a valid citizen of the United States.
Right. Well, certainly, but at the same time, he grew up in that culture of the neocon movement, but also with this particular focus on Latin America and wanting to conduct a regime change. And really, I think it's more about Cuba than even is Venezuela. But he sees Venezuela as an obstacle to being able to complete the regime change in Cuba, and is willing to at least weaken Maduro, if not completely remove him from power, to facilitate all this.
And what about Colombia? They're going to go after Colombia next?
Maybe. It's hard to imagine. I think Colombia is a major non-NATO U.S. ally, which doesn't necessarily mean they're in a treaty with the U.S., but they do have a lot of American military equipment. So I'm guessing they would use other pressures to get Venezuela in line, maybe even going so far as to promise the Venezuelan people $20 billion that they wrote for the right candidate during the next election, like we did in Argentina. So there's different ways we could exert pressure on Colombia, but we are carrying out strikes off of Colombia's coast now in international waters, but near Colombia, drug traffickers, we claim, alleged drug traffickers, we claim are from Colombia.
Who is the Latin American president whose visa was revoked by Rubio? Is that the president of Colombia?
I believe so. And he certainly is staunchly against what Netanyahu is doing in Israel and what the U.S. is trying to do in Venezuela, and, sees the U.S. intervention in South America as a problem. So I don't think the Trump administration likes him. They see him as a problem. I just don't think they're going to look to military solutions to him in power where they will with Maduro.
Who believes, well, let me restate this. Do you know any serious thinker who believes that this narco-terrorist nonsense that Trump and Hegseth and Rubio perpetrate about Maduro?
No, but that really says something about the people running this country, that there's no critical enough thinkers anywhere in Congress. I mean, I guess you have Rand Paul and Thomas Massie, Tim Kaine, Adam Schiff, who have stood up against this. But generally speaking, the Trump administration doesn't have any kind of justification for this. There's no evidence that they're actually killing drug traffickers. And certainly they're not killing anybody bringing fentanyl to the United States. Yet this isn't a major topic of conversation. The Democrats have tried to throw Trump in jail or impeach him over every questionably legal thing that he has done since 2015. And yet now, when he's doing something very clearly illegal, they largely have nothing to say about the matter. It's really disappointing.
It's a tragedy that the president can go on killing people and Congress does nothing about it. The courts don't have a case before them. I was cautiously optimistic, Kyle, that the two people who survived the killing attempt and then were kidnapped by the Navy and the DOJ for 2 days, Pam Bondi must have been pulling her hair out. She didn't know what the hell to do with them. If she arrested them, she'd need evidence. She had no evidence. There was no indictment. There was no charge. And if she let them go, she could be charged with kidnapping. So she deported them to El Salvador. El Salvador said, we don't want these people. They didn't do anything to us. We're going to send them home. They went home to Colombia. They can sue the Justice Department without ever coming back to the United States. They just need American lawyers to do it. They have claims for attempted murder and kidnapping against the president of the United States. It sounds absurd, but it's true.
Yeah, it is true. And I believe families in Afghanistan and maybe Iraq as well have tried to sue the United States. I think it would be very hard for them to make any kind of progress, especially as we just move further and further from any kind of real justice system or constitutional constraints of anything in this country.
Wow. Kyle, it's a pleasure to chat with you. I know we put this together without much notice, but it's a great conversation. I'm deeply grateful. Thank you. Who are you interviewing this week? Do you know yet?
transition. He became the first U.S. president to meet with a Syrian leader in 25 years. They waited for it to be an Al-Qaeda guy. So for 25 years, the United States president has not met with the president of Syria, but now Trump is going to finally that the head of Syria is an Al-Qaeda guy. Hey, guess what? Trump is going to host an Al-Qaeda guy, the head of Al-Qaeda, who they installed as the head of Syria after they overthrew Assad. And then he started wiping out Christians. Oh, guess what? He took off his jihad costume, and now he's wearing a blue suit, and Trump is going to welcome him at the White House.
Hey, Nigeria, stop killing Christians. Hey.
Yep. President Trump is going to host Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharia at the White House on Friday. So a White House official told
Not his name, by the way.
That's not his real name. His name is like Jablani or something, right? What's his real name? Look it up. What? I can't. You
Zoran Mamdani.
What is it?
Zoran Mamdani.
Zoran Mamdani. The planned visit is just the latest significant step in the administration's effort to shore up relations with Damascus, is nearly 1 year after al-Shara's forces toppled the... Okay. In a remarkable turn for al-Shara, a former Islamist rebel. That's how they refer to him now. A former...
Not an ISIS and an Al-Qaeda?
Not the head of Al-Qaeda?
He's got a better resume than Hunter Biden. We'll give the man some credit.
Trump has sought to ease the new government's transition. He became the first U.S. president to meet with a Syrian leader in 25 years. They waited for it to be an Al-Qaeda guy. So for 25 years, the United States president has not met with the president of Syria, but now Trump is going to finally that the head of Syria is an Al-Qaeda guy.
Hey, any vets out there get your dick blown off in Iraq? I want you to look at this. This is how it ended up. They made ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they installed in Syria. Is everybody insane, dude?
Trump pushed al-Shara to normalize. So Trump pushed the Al-Qaeda guy to normalize relations with Israel. So now, you know how we said, isn't it funny that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are sworn enemies of the Jews and Israel, except they never attack Israel? Isn't that funny? Really. It's almost like the United States and Israel invented ISIS and invented Al-Qaeda and funds them. It's almost like
Boko Haram. And now we know why.
Turns out the United States also funding Boko Haram, another Islamic terrorist group.
Jimmy, remember terrorism, Islamo-terror shot up 3,000% since we started helping them fight it? Well, now you know why. Because we made it.
So, in May, Trump met with that guy in Saudi Arabia. That's where this picture's from. They met in Saudi Arabia. So that's Trump meeting the Al-Qaeda guy in Saudi Arabia. And he's like, I can't believe I'm meeting with somebody who flew those planes into the trade towers. That's who these people are. That's who he's meeting with. He's like, I can't believe I have to do this.
The worst ones.
That's the look Trump has on his face. Like, can you believe I have to do this?
Can you believe he saw the guy's head off right on camera?
Yep. These are the head choppers. And then after that meeting, Trump said he was a young, attractive, tough guy. Strong past, very strong past, fighter. He's got a real shot at holding it together.
Well,
in late June, he signed an executive order revoking most American sanctions against Syria. And in early July, the State Department rescinded the Foreign Terrorist Organization declaration for al-Nusra Front. So they just, instead of calling it Al-Qaeda, they called it al-Nusra. And the State Department said it was a foreign terrorist organization up until July of this year. They're like, oh, the guy's running Syria. They're not terrorists anymore. It's because we've been funding them and they're working with us and Israel. Isn't that it?
What proof do you need
to overthrow Syria? So think about that. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the United States, and Israel all working together to overthrow Syria.
Yay! I have had scumbags tweet at me, well, Assad was a butcher. Was he? Assad was a butcher. Not the ISIS guy.
Not the ISIS guy. So, Syria, new investigation reveals evidence government and affiliated forces extrajudicially executed dozens of Druze people in Suwada. So that's the new government slaughtering people. There's more. Syrian forces massacre 1,500 Alawites. And the chain of command led to Damascus, meaning it led to that guy, meaning it led to this guy, that guy,
The ISIS guy,
the ISIS guy.
the David Miscavige of ISIS.
Yes. A UN report finds widespread killing by Syrian government allies earlier this year. That means this guy, that guy, slaughtering people in Syria. That guy. Ron Paul says it is the insanity of U.S. foreign policy in a nutshell that self-styled Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa is to be welcomed to the White House. Just before al-Shara's U.S.-aided rise to power in Syria last year, he was head of the local al-Qaeda branch in Syria. Before that, al-Sharaa worked with the al-Qaeda in Iraq and is responsible for the death of numerous U.S. service members. Hey, here he is with the Israelis. Here he is with the Jews. So look at this. Members of the Jewish Heritage in Syria Foundation are in Washington today advocating for a full repeal of the Caesar Act, aligned with the Trump administration ahead of next week's White House meeting with Syria's new president, Ahmed al-Sharaa. They're all happy that there's an al-Qaeda guy in charge of Syria. They're all happy about it. Look at all the smiles.
You've got enough there for a dancing Jew group like 9/11.
And here's the press secretary, and listen to what she says. Listen to this.
Over the weekend, there were reports that President Trump was due to host President of Syria, Ahmed al-Sharaa, on Monday. Do you have any preview for that meeting? Is he expected to invite him to join the U.S.-led anti-ISIS coalition?
So they asked him about the meeting that President Trump is having with the ISIS guy who's in charge of Syria now, and she asked a pretty funny question. Hey, is he going to ask him to join their anti-ISIS coalition? Let's hear what let's see what she says.
I can confirm that that meeting will be taking place here at the White House on Monday, and this is part of the president's efforts in diplomacy to meet with anyone around the world in the pursuit of peace. And
oh, so that's what this is. Mm-hmm. Trump's going to meet with anybody around the world in pursuit of peace. Isn't it weird that he won't meet with Maduro from Venezuela?
Oh, what about the last ISIS guy he killed? That he goes, he died like a dog at the vet with my family crying, petting him.
White House says letter from Maduro to Trump contains a lot of lies. The White House said Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's letter to President Donald Trump, in which he called for a meeting, contained a lot of lies.
Wait,
who do you think's lying in this situation? Who do you think's lying? We have seen this letter. Frankly, I think there were a lot of lies that were repeated by Maduro in that letter, and the administration's position on Venezuela has not changed. So, no, not going to meet. So this idea, I'll meet with al-Qaeda. I'll meet with ISIS. I won't meet with Nicolas Maduro because we want to overthrow him, just like Trump wouldn't meet with President Assad, just like Joe Biden wouldn't meet with President Assad because they don't want a peace deal. They want to overthrow them.
You'd think after the Democrats do it to you, you'd have the human decency to know how fucked that is, wouldn't you?
You would think. She said that the U.S. views the Maduro regime as illegitimate and that Trump is ready to take all necessary measures to stop the Venezuelan regime's illegal drug trafficking. That's all such. You got to be so gullible to believe this. Venezuela confirmed on Sunday that Maduro had sent a letter to Trump proposing the establishment of direct dialogue between the two countries. So Maduro wants to have a dialogue. He wants to have a meeting. In the letter dated September 6th, Maduro rejected accusations that his government is linked to the mafia and drug trafficking networks, calling the allegations completely unfounded and describing such claims as fake news as harmful to bilateral relations. The letter also dismissed reports that Venezuela had refused to accept the return of deported migrants, stressing that those stories were false. They will accept deported migrants. Asked about the letter and Venezuela's reported call for negotiations, President Trump declined to comment directly, saying, "We'll see what happens with Venezuela." Trump has dispatched warships and submarines to the Southern Caribbean on counter-narcotics missions, and U.S. forces have destroyed at least 3 suspected Venezuelan drug boats in recent weeks. So again, this is the opposite of what we were told Trump was going to do. Trump is now cozying up with Islamic terrorists, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and he's starting a new war in South America with Venezuela. The exact opposite of what people want him to do. Let Venezuela alone. And so now he has to, so They used to change it. The old story was that Maduro was a dictator. We have to liberate their people. And now the new story is, okay, people weren't buying that story. All right, so the new story is, oh, he's running drugs, even though fentanyl is coming from Mexico. The drugs aren't coming from Venezuela.
Well, hasn't Trump brought it up to President Scheinbaum? I'm sure President Scheinbaum of Mexico will get right on it.
So Trump did shut down the border. So that's the one thing he did. And he didn't do anything else he promised. He didn't get rid of censorship. He didn't get rid of DEI because he's got DEI and censorship for Zionists. He didn't get rid of that at all. He's got DEI and censorship for Israel, Jews, and Zionists. He's not stopping the wars. He's still funding the Ukraine war. He's bombing Yemen at the behest of Israel. He bombed Iran at the behest of Israel. He's slaughtering people. And he's funding the slaughter of and genocide in Gaza.
Jimmy.
And now he's trying to overthrow. And he's going to do it in Nigeria. He's sending Marines down to Haiti. He's John McCain, even though he pretends he's not. And I know it's
might
tough.
be worse, Jimmy. Yeah, first of all, Israel's allowed to traffic, never mind fentanyl, Israel's allowed to traffic your fucking children. Venezuela's not even allowed to imaginary traffic fentanyl that they didn't do.
So I know I've covered this story about how the head of Syria is an Al-Qaeda ISIS guy and that the United States has been propping him up. I know I've covered this. I covered it. But I just can't get over this story. And that now as we still have Guantanamo open, Donald Trump,
I can't believe
as
it.
we still have Guantanamo open, Donald Trump is welcoming legit Al-Qaeda guy to the White House.
He's a young guy.
This doesn't drive MAGA people crazy. The people who literally flew the planes into the trade towers, not fake Mandami, but the people who literally did it. Al-Qaeda, this guy who killed U.S. soldiers in Iraq, this guy. Trump is welcoming him to the White House.
Yo, if your programming don't break, it ain't gonna. If that don't break your program, seeing that, you ain't gonna get out, motherfucker.
Imagine if Kamala Harris was doing that. How much the right-wing commenters would be going effing crazy.
Yeah, we'd be locked down with bird flu.
Sean Hannity would be going crazy.
Yeah.
But not now. Okay. Come see us make jokes about this, and we're going to be we only have tickets available in Melbourne. We're going to be in Melbourne.
And the West has shown
Orientalism at the University of Tehran. And Professor, we have a lot of news coming out of the Middle East right now. Israel has opened up a killing spree once again. Hezbollah has put out an open letter, effectively trying to get the government to align with it in resistance, effectively saying, look, we need to work together in our resistance against Israel. What is the point of having some kind of new negotiations when they never lived up to the previous negotiations? We've been calling this a ceasefire, when really they've continued murdering over the course of this quote unquote ceasefire. Well, Israel has effectively opened up a war directly. Ceasefire is off, quote unquote. And there's a widespread belief that the region is about to erupt. What are your thoughts on this? Do you see this as taking place also, that for all intents and purposes, the Middle East is about to, for lack of a better term, explode?
Yes, we are very close to a major war. The Israeli regime has shown that it does not recognize ceasefires, and the West has shown that they are lying when they call themselves ceasefire guarantors.
Yeah.
And the Western media has shown itself to be completely bankrupt, and so has Twitter and all those platforms that are controlled by the West, because they are promoting the Israeli narrative. They are silent about murders carried out by the Israeli regime. But whenever they do start bombing and killing people, they pretend as if the Israelis are doing this to preserve the ceasefire. This is, one of the dystopian realities that we're living with today. The West has put aside any mask that it once had about honesty, about reporting, about journalism, about human rights, about human dignity. That's all gone. They've turned very medieval, and these regimes have gone back to their roots. So the Israeli regime, for a very long period of time, they've been bombing regularly and killing people in Lebanon, assassinating, but often killing ordinary people. They murdered an American Lebanese family, the 3 kids, just a few weeks ago. And the father was also Lebanese American, but the US government, the US embassy, did nothing about it. They bombed their car in southern Lebanon. And so when they're allowed to kill Americans and get away with it, obviously killing ordinary Lebanese citizens means nothing to these journalists who are based in Tel Aviv or based in Beirut, but they work for their overlord. So the West is preparing the Israelis. Weapons are coming in, and I think we are quite close. Hezbollah has been very patient.
Yes, sir.
Jamal, you know how I feel about Hezbollah. Hezbollah is an extraordinary organization. They sacrifice so much for the people of Gaza. They put their own lives on the line. They've had thousands of martyrs, women and children included, in order to ease the pressure off of Gaza. What community would do that for another community on this planet? They're unique. So since the ceasefire, where the Western powers were supposedly guarantors, but obviously they were lying. The Israelis have been bombing Lebanon regularly, murdering people, as I said, even American citizens. And yesterday we saw a big intensification of those attacks. However, Hezbollah's patience, I think, has paid off, because the whole of Lebanon recognizes, and I mean, when I mean the whole of Lebanon, I mean a strong majority. You're always going to have people on the US payroll, on the European payroll, because the West has more NGOs in Lebanon than anywhere else in the world. I mean, there are NGOs everywhere. There's funding coming from all across Europe and North America to these different groups. And they're closely aligned with militias like Samir Jaja, his Lebanese forces. He was involved in the very famous massacre of Sabra and Shatila in 1982, where they slaughtered 3,500. I don't know the exact number right now, but maybe 3,500 Palestinians and Lebanese in a refugee camp under Israeli supervision in 24, 36 hours. These are the US allies in Lebanon. And of course, Hezbollah has been under all sorts of pressure, because Jolani is, as we all were expecting from day one when Syria fell, he is an American tool. We saw him and Petraeus in their little love fest together.
Yeah.
Petraeus telling him how, where he's worried about his sleep and how he should sleep well, and saying, I'm one of your biggest fans. And so obviously, these people were in it together. He's just basically a US tool. And Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, their role in Syria, their role in Lebanon, their role to undermine the resistance within the broader picture that is designed by the United States and the Israelis is clear for all. So Hezbollah has been under a lot of pressure from US assets in Syria, from US assets in Lebanon, and from the Israeli regime itself.
Yes.
But Their patience and sacrifices over the past few months and over the past 2 years has paid off in multiple ways. One is that across the region and beyond, Hezbollah has been seen both as heroic and it's been vindicated, because in Syria, those who are attacking Hezbollah, saying they were supporting a dictator, now see that everything that Hezbollah was saying from 2011 was absolutely correct.
Mhm.
So Hezbollah is both seen as sacrificing for the Palestinians, and all the accusations made by agents of the United States, by tools of the United States, people paid for by Qatar, people paid for by Saudis and others, oil and gas rich dictatorships, and Erdogan, who for well over a decade had been slandering Hezbollah in line with US and Israeli policy. Their narrative has been crushed. It's been destroyed. We see what's happening in Syria now. We see how Jolani is going to the White House to meet Trump,
Yeah.
and be a tool like all other tools in the region, like we saw in the Monkey Show in Egypt, in Sharm el Sheikh. So Hezbollah's position morally in the eyes of the region and beyond has been enhanced dramatically. Second of all, Hezbollah inside Lebanon has shown the vast majority of the Lebanese, it is proven to them that the Israeli regime in the United States cannot be trusted, because there has been no ceasefire. And the United States has not chosen to protect Lebanon, even in order to pretend so that it could gain concessions for the Israeli regime. None of that. So the people of Lebanon know that the only thing that can stand up against Israeli aggression is Hezbollah. And so that, while the Lebanese prime minister, who is a tool of the United States, just like the other regional leaders, while he's been trying to push for civil war on behalf of the United States, he's failed, because people see through the propaganda and they see what's really happening. So unity in the country is much stronger. The armed forces, the president, from what I'm hearing and from what I'm seeing, their coordination with Hezbollah is increasing. The president is much more concerned today about what the Israeli regime is doing than before. And he used to be the commander of the Lebanese armed forces too, so he knows Hezbollah. He's cooperated with Hezbollah in the past. So the coordination that exists, despite the Saudis and the Americans and the Jolani and Qatar and Turkey and all these other elements, the coordination today seems to be much better. The unity among the strong majority of the Lebanese people is much better. And moral support for Hezbollah across the region and across the world is much higher. And Hezbollah has been preparing itself very rapidly. It has learned from the previous war its strengths and how to build upon those strengths. And it has learned from its weaknesses, just like the Iranians in the 12-day war. It's learned from its weaknesses and is dealing with those weaknesses and redevising its military posture and policy so that in the next war of aggression by the Israeli regime, they could perform much better. But it's not just in Lebanon, Jamal. In Yemen, they are preparing themselves for war. And Yemen is stronger than the Israelis and the Americans believe. The Americans, of course, they failed in their war against Ansarullah and the Lebanese armed force, in the Yemeni armed forces a few months ago. Today, Yemen is stronger than back then. Then you have the situation in Syria. Jolani is very weak. The country is broken. It is significantly worse today than it was when Assad fell. But under these circumstances, he's not even able to provide security through his Takfiri, ISIS, and Al Qaeda allies and their affiliates. So the economy is falling apart. The extremists who are in power, who are terrorizing people, but they cannot even provide a security for their own people. and for those parts of cities and towns that are of strategic value. So discontent is on the rise. A lot of those who were before opposed to ISIS and Al Qaeda, they are regrouping across the country. So this will not bode well for the Americans or the Israelis or their regional allies. Then we have Iraq, where if the Iraqi people see the United States is slaughtering and the Israeli regime are slaughtering the Lebanese, then I think U.S. assets in Iraq will be treated very differently. And there's also Iran. So it's not as if it's just going to be between the Israeli regime and the resistance. The situation has changed, and the world has turned against Israel, Jamal.
Yes.
We've seen polls in the United States. We see how on the right people have turned against the Israeli regime. We see how the Zionists are at war basically with Tucker Carlson, which I think is a somewhat decisive chapter in U.S. internal politics. And we saw the elections in New York. I have no particular view on. I have no particular view on Mamdani, but we'll have to wait and see what he's really like. Some are concerned that he'll be another Obama. I don't know. I mean, I doubt that that's a precise.
Well, they're attacking him just because he's Muslim. They know nothing about the guy. That's the worst part about it.
And since I don't know much about him either, but the point is that people voted for him.
That's right.
70%, I think, of people under 30 voted for him. 32% of Jews voted for him. And I would imagine that Jews under 30, it would be much higher. And this again shows something that we've discussed before on your show on multiple occasions. And I really always feel that this has to be remembered, that Jews are at the forefront of the resistance against Zionism and the genocide. We've seen it from day one. We saw it during the protests in the United States early on. And then we saw the crackdown on campuses and elsewhere. But the polls indicate New York being, from what I hear, the city with the largest amount of Jews in the world after Tel Aviv. New York does not have a pro-Zionist youth among the Jews.
They don't.
And that, I think, says a lot. And those who want to equate Zionism with Judaism, including Zionists themselves, they're trying to effectively blame ordinary Jews for their crimes. But these young Jews have shown to the world that they have nothing to do with, just like ordinary Muslims have nothing to do with ISIS and Al Qaeda and all these other terrorist groups that are supported by Western intelligence agencies. Zionism, which is supported by the corridors of power in the West, they do not represent Jews, as we're seeing in the election in New York.
Yeah, there is a difference. One is a political ideology, one is a religion, and Israel has made this consistent attempt to make it as if all of it is the same thing. And to even go so far as to say that, well, if you're calling somebody a Zionist, you're being anti-Semitic. Like they've went heavy into this idea of trying to make all of these things just one. And I'm telling you, there's a huge thread in the United States that pushes against this in regards to Jews themselves, that push against this idea of what Israel has been doing in Israel. So no, I agree with you. How does will Iran get further involved into this if indeed this breaks out into an all-out war? I mean, up to this point, Iran has assisted, you could say, behind the scenes. But from the standpoint of getting directly involved into a conflict, they got involved directly when they were attacked. Is that true this time around? One of my guests made the point of saying that the United States is effectively sending armaments and everything to Venezuela. They're still dealing with Ukraine. They're talking about invading Nigeria. And they are so spread out around the globe that this would be the opportunity for Iran to assist Lebanon if indeed a war breaks out. What are your thoughts on this? How do you see it?
Well, let me first start somewhere else, because you mentioned some places. Trump speaks about Christians in Nigeria, and
Right.
the way he spoke was just outrageous.
Yeah.
But well, if he cares about Christians, why is he bombing Christians in the Caribbean? Why is he murdering Christians?
Yeah.
You know, Venezuela, by the way, Jamal, I've been there multiple times. I have very good friends there, and we're in constant contact.
It's a Catholic country, right?
Sorry?
It's a Catholic country, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
It is overwhelmingly Catholic. It is not. It is different from Cuba. Cuba has always been, after the Communist Revolution, it was sensitive towards religion, less so in recent decades. But the Venezuelan government and the political establishment is Catholic. They are a very decent people who each have faith in religion and God. And so when Trump is bombing these boats, he's bombing Christians. And so if he cares about Christians in Nigeria, why doesn't he care about Christians that he's threatening in Venezuela? Then Trump speaks about Nigeria. First of all, these terror groups in Nigeria are Boko Haram, which are from the same ideology that the West has been supporting for decades.
Yes.
Coming out of Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The official religion of Qatar, I would call it a religion, is Wahhabism. The major mosque in Qatar is called the Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab Mosque. So this extremist ideology is Takfiri Salafism and Takfiri Wahhabism that influences Boko Haram is the result of the actions of the U.S. and its proxies. And then we have ISIS or Islamic State in Nigeria, the same, and we have Al Qaeda. These different groups, they're all products of the Western Empire. Just like what we have, let's say, in Ukraine, how they were supporting the right sector and all the other fascist forces that have been empowered by the United States and the Ukrainian government against the Russians and against the Russian-speaking people in the east of the country. The ISIS and Al Qaeda is their product. So in Nigeria, first of all, these people, these terrorists, are not just killing Christians; they're killing Muslims too.
Right.
It's not as if their wrath is directed at one side. And where is the money coming from? Who has the money to pay for all these weapons and so on? It's obvious. There's no doubt who is behind all this. So the killing of Christians and Muslims in Nigeria is a result of Western regimes and their policies. The killing of people in their boats, whether in the Pacific or in the Caribbean, I don't know much about the Pacific, but in the Caribbean, they're not taking drugs to the United States. I mean, I'm sure you've gone over this multiple times, so I don't want to repeat it.
Yeah.
And then if Trump cares so much about Christians, he could have stopped the war in Ukraine on day one. When he had, you're American, you were in the United States when he was elected. He won all the swing states. He had a mandate.
Yes, he did.
He had the political clout to end that war. He could have imposed a peace on Ukraine and saved the hundreds of thousands of people who've died in the last 7 months, and 7 or 8 months. And now the war is escalating. The Ukrainian defenses are falling apart, and obviously the more these defenses fall apart, the worse the bloodbath gets. So he's killing all these poor Christian men, and by killing all these poor Christian men, what's going to happen to all these Christian women, all these young women? Who's going to support them? Who's going to take care of them? Their lives are destroyed permanently.
Yeah.
Millions, hundreds of thousands, and in all millions. So he does not care about Christians. He is, as we see in Israel, he's Israeli first, and he's not even American first, let alone Christian first or Christian. But Iran's, I think, is quite clear, and we've discussed this probably together early on when we used to have our conversations elsewhere, and maybe on your own show here as well. Iran, I said before, Iran will not let Gaza fall under any circumstances. And, because during the first few weeks, a lot of people after October the 7th were very concerned about whether the resistance could preserve itself in Gaza. And I always said that Iran, under no circumstances, will allow Gaza to fall. And they fought for over 2 years, and the Israeli regime failed. They failed to take Gaza. And if the war restarts, they will still fail to take Gaza. Iran will not allow the Israeli regime to defeat Hezbollah. They will not allow the Israeli regime to take southern Lebanon. That will not happen. So by any means necessary, as was one of the shows on one of your sister programs on Sputnik or back in the day, by any means necessary, the Iranians will make sure that the Israeli regime fails. And the Israeli regime is playing with fire because the situation in the region is not to its benefit. And the world has changed and the region has changed. They are not in a strong position. Netanyahu and his Western allies can pretend that he's been winning across the board. He has not been winning. He has won nothing. Slaughtering people is not winning.
Right.
At the end of the day, empowering yourself and your regime or your state or your government, whoever it is what's important. Israel today is much weaker than what it was 2 years ago. Starting another war will just show the world that this regime, its issues cannot be solved. Those who are still sort of half awake, those who think that some sort of peace is possible with this genocidal regime, they'll say they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Even they will wake up because it's not just Palestinians, it's everyone. They even bombed Qatar. Of course, they bombed Qatar with US support.
Yep.
And you saw Trump just admit that he was behind the attack on Iran, the war against Iran.
I saw.
So he has Iranian blood on his hand as he was negotiating. It just shows that you cannot deal with the United States. It's a criminal regime. And he hurts himself, by the way, because those who want to negotiate with the United States anywhere in the world, they have to take this into account, that this is the sort of negotiator Trump is. He does nothing in good faith. The Chinese will take that into account. I think once upon a time, Trump thought that by being a thug, he could get more concessions and then everyone else will fall in line. But it's really doing the opposite. People are giving him fake concessions so that he just go away, and everyone else is busy realigning themselves with each other to protect themselves against this guy. So it's not working the way he thought that if he was like the Godfather, that everyone would submit to him, but it's not working that way. He's just creating realignments. The whole world is tilting away from him, whether it's ASEAN or BRICS or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it doesn't matter. Everyone is thinking about how to protect themselves against the United States, because even if you do a deal with someone like Trump, or you want to do a deal, that doesn't mean anything.
No.
Because he'll just tear it up, or he'll just violate it. He'll lie. And so Trump, by admitting that he was involved in or behind the war against Iran, is telling Iranians, don't negotiate with me. It's of no use. It's useless. And in future, Iran should definitely demand compensation for the crimes that the United States has committed against the country. But I cannot say what will happen. I don't want to predict the future because we don't know what the Israeli regime is doing. I'm not in the Iranian government. I'm not in the military. But what I do know is that Iran has many cards to play with, and so does the axis of resistance. And the Israeli regime is in a very difficult situation.
Can I ask what those cards are?
Well, first of all, Iran today is much stronger than what it was 4 or 5 months ago. It's much stronger.
Yeah.
It has been strengthening its capabilities, and it has been
Mitigating its
solving, or let's say dealing with its weaknesses.
Yeah.
The Israelis gave it they gave it their best shot. And the Iranians held back. The Iranians fired. They did not use their most sophisticated missile systems. They did not use their, the Iranians did not even use many of their air defenses because they wanted to keep them for a, if there's a bigger fight. But now the Iranians know more about the regime's offensive capabilities. Iran's own offensive capabilities have been expanded. So Iran is much stronger today than it was, and much more confident. Ordinary people, ordinary people, once they've seen war, they no longer fear it like they did before the war. I mean, war is a horrible thing. But, before the Israeli regime attacked, many Iranians were wondering what would happen. It's like, when you go into a swimming pool, if the water is cold and you keep putting your foot in and your toe in and you pull it out again. But once you jump in, then you just, you start swimming.
Yeah.
You go to work. And we've been through that. So we know what we need to do if and when the time comes. And just like the snapback, if you recall, we discussed the snapback, I think, and I said that there will be a period of the markets being unsettled because people will fear the snapback. But then after a few weeks, they'll see that nothing really happened. And that's exactly what happened. Once the Europeans use their card, then they no longer have a card.
Yeah.
So the Iranians are not fearful of war. No one wants war, but Iran is not fearful of war. So Iran is much more capable today. It's much more prepared today.
United.
The U.S. is overstretched. It's Russia, China, Nigeria, Venezuela, South Africa, everywhere apparently. They're at war with everyone. Mexico, So the United States is not in a strong position. If U.S. assets in Iraq are attacked by the people of Iraq or the resistance, what is the United States going to do about it? And Iraq exports, after the Saudis and the Russians, I think they're the largest world exporters of oil right now. Messing with Iraq is not going to be a good thing for the United States or for the global economy. So, and again, Yemen. So there are many things that can happen that could go wrong, and they probably will go wrong for the United States, and it will go very badly for Trump because he, of course, will be seen as the person who pushes the price of oil up, the person who's leading to more catastrophic wars, and the person who's doing everything for the sake of his overlord Netanyahu and the Zionists in the Zionist oligarchs.
It was believed that Netanyahu had to keep going in regards to war. Otherwise, he'd be either put in a jail cell or at the very least forced out of office politically, because Israel keeps, the government keeps going up and down. Is that what's going on here? Also, that for all intents and purposes, that the fake ceasefire that's taking place in Gaza gives this impression that, okay, well, the war is over with, in which case now he needs to initiate another war in order to maintain some kind of political power and political credibility that keeps him in office?
I think that definitely has a lot to do with it. I mean, the very fact that Trump in the Knesset spoke about pardoning Netanyahu,
right?
Why would he need to say that?
Right.
He wants to ease the pressure on Netanyahu in my opinion, basically so that Netanyahu would not have to keep waging these wars and putting the United States in so much trouble. And then again, just 2-3 days ago, Trump said that the United States is going to help him with his
Court case.
with his legal issues. So I think that must be important. Otherwise, why would a foreign leader or a leader of another entity speak about Netanyahu's problems twice within the last weeks and trying to sort them out?
Right.
It's like saying, especially when it has to do with the judiciary. But in any case, I think that has a lot to do with it. Also, Israeli society is deeply divided. The Zionists are of different political persuasions, but some of them are, they're not Semites actually for the most part.
Right.
Not
the Semites, but the
Ashkenazis,
Palestinians.
European, the Palestinians are the Semites. But in any case, they are deeply divided culturally, politically, and there are lots of tensions. Apparently, the so-called president of the Israeli regime warned about. I don't know if he how he was warning about internal strife, and this was something that was on the rise before October the 7th.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a deeply divided country. He needs crises and crises, and I think the West likes to believe, because the political establishment in the West is genocidal. They are the Nazis of our time.
Yeah.
They're worse than Nazis, but they still are saying Israel is winning, even though the populations are seeing through all the propaganda. But I think they do believe their propaganda. Washington, I think Tucker Carlson said once that Washington is like 10,000 people, and they all either know each other, or they know about each other. They're all talking to themselves. It is that bubble that we talk together about sometimes.
Yeah.
They, the West, these elites are in their bubble. They think they're winning. They're always winning. They're winning in Venezuela. They've been winning in Venezuela. Even though we always knew that this would be the end result of Venezuela. In Ukraine. We knew that what's going on in Israel, in Palestine, was not going to end well for the Israeli regime, and people across the world would wake up to this reality, and they did. As day by day, as the atrocities continue, things got worse. So the West, in my opinion, is miscalculating these elites who live in their bubble. Netanyahu needs tension for those purposes. And also, I think he wants to be seen as the person who created the greater Israel. But they simply don't have the cards that they pretend they do, or they imagine that they do.
But Israel has been at war for 2 years at this point, and you have a small military.
Oh.
You know what I mean, like this kind of constant murder, and I don't even want to call it a war. They've just been murdering people for all of these years.
I mean, even the last it's 2 years and a month now.
Yeah. You would think that the military, part of me thought that part of the reason that they went the ceasefire route, quote unquote, was because they needed to rest their military. That you had a large number of soldiers that started getting killed, injured, offing themselves, etc. And you had like tens, like 50,000, if not more, that didn't show up for military duty. And so you had
some people leaving the country for good.
Exactly. And so my thought was, okay, they needed to rest the military. But that doesn't seem to be the way Netanyahu is thinking about this. I mean, he's immediately going into another military campaign against Lebanon. And as you point out, and as my other guests will point out, this is a tinderbox. Like, you're not necessarily dealing with one country. You may be dealing with several countries at once. I guess my thing is, do you think this is part of it? Yeah, politically, where he feels that he needs to continue with war in order to maintain power. But the other part of this is the greater Israel project. And I guess my thing is, they are talking about this openly now. Why do you think there's this disparity in the way they talked about it before versus now? Beforehand, it was talked about in hushed tones. And now it's loudly proclaimed, this is what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to take Lebanon. We're trying to take Syria. We're going to take parts of Egypt. Hell, we're going to take parts of Turkey. And they're just openly saying this. We're going to take Jordan. That's pretty astonishing to me. Why did the changeover? Why the new confidence? Is it because they murdered so many people and they believe that Trump backs them to the hilt, in which case they need to get all of this stuff done now? Or do you think something else is going on in the way that they're thinking about this?
Well, I don't know how much of it's confidence. A part of it is confidence because, as I said, they live in their bubble.
Right.
And they're not looking at the reality on the ground where people across the world are not just turning against them, they hate them.
Yes.
But
murderers, psychopaths.
Part of it is that. Part of it is that they have to keep, these fanatics. Netanyahu has to keep those zealots, Zionist zealots, on board. Those who are in his coalition.
Yeah.
And so he has to, keep killing. I mean, they've been slaughtering a lot of people, by the way, in the West Bank over the last few days.
Yes, they have.
Just yesterday, I think 2 kids were murdered.
Yeah.
And they stole their bodies. So, but you don't see anything, you don't see the Western media making any, a big fuss about it. They don't care. Just like they didn't care about the American citizens who were murdered in southern Lebanon a few weeks ago. It just shows, they're all tools of this empire. It's things have become so clear.
Yes.
For everyone that it's there really isn't much to say anymore. But I think that it is partially to keep the coalition intact, partially because some of them are in that bubble and they think that they are achieving something. But what it's doing is creating greater anger. It's creating greater outrage across the region and beyond. Because the very fact that they're seeking greater Israel is proving what people like ourselves were saying all along.
Yes.
Now they're saying, in the past, whenever we'd say it, Western diplomats and journalists would say, no, that's not the intention. We're seeking a 2-state solution. The 2-state solution, Jamal, from day one was fake. There was never an intention for a 2-state solution. And Alistair Crook, who knows occupied Palestine quite well, once when he visited, the prime minister of the Israeli regime, if I'm not mistaken, told his people to give him a tour of the occupied West Bank. Back then, there were a lot less settlers still back then. And he went and visited some of these places, and he saw that they were crazy. They were mad people. They were like the craziest of the crazy. And he said that they were put there intentionally because these people would never leave willingly. So from day one, when the regime was colonizing the West Bank, Americans and Europeans, all these European diplomats, these human rights advocates, and these women's rights advocates, and these children's rights advocates, all of that was fake.
Yeah,
they were buying time for the Israeli regime so that it could create a new reality on the ground in the West Bank.
What do you got? Facts on the ground is the way I think Smotrich.
Yes, new facts. So you have more and more settlers, so that there would be no option. Now there is no, a 2-state solution.
Yeah.
So that, I think, the fact that they're open about it is not in their interest, but they are open about it because Netanyahu has to be open about it. It's what strengthens his hand as the prime minister of the regime. But at the same time, it creates greater outrage across the region and across the globe. And, he's making Hezbollah more popular. Hezbollah is becoming, iconic, and just like Ansarullah. And all those tools of Qatar and Erdogan and NATO and the Israelis and all those, all those narratives against the resistance, they've all been demolished thanks to the policies of the Israeli regime itself. And at the end of the day, even though the French murdered well over 1 million Algerians, it did not end in French victory. It ended in French defeat.
Yeah, murder in and of itself doesn't necessarily win a war. It's about objectives. Please permit me 2 more questions. One on the Abraham Accords. And the other one I want just on Venezuela and Iran's relationship with Venezuela. On the Abraham Accords, what do you think of this? I mean, for all intents and purposes, the United States seems to trying to create what they realized they couldn't do militarily against Iran, they seem to be trying to do diplomatically with this kind of isolation of Iran using all of these Middle Eastern countries. Syria may be part of it under Jelani. I mean, at this point, he's a Western puppet, so he may even be part of it. They're going to put military bases in Syria from the United States. You're getting these quisling governments that seemingly are going to be a part of it, like the UAE, Qatar, etc. Is this going to work in the way that they're trying to operate with this kind of blockade of Iran, or this isolation of Iran, using these governments that are going to be submissive to, for lack of a better word, Zionist supremacist regime that is going to be in the region?
No, I mean, the Abraham Accords is the members and the potential members are already in the same boat. And the only reason why some of these countries resist
Good point.
formally joining is because they're afraid of their own people.
Yeah.
And those countries that do join are taking a risk.
Very good point.
So if you think that, like, Turkey, let's say Turkey joins the Abraham Accords, what changes? They're already doing business. They have diplomatic ties. They are transporting oil from the Republic of Azerbaijan. All it does is that it delegitimizes Erdogan further.
Yeah.
In the eyes of those who are truly supportive of the Palestinian people. Or the same is true in the Republic of Azerbaijan. So, or let's say Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is very, right now, flights from Asia go over Saudi Arabia to Palestine. They allow it. So there is, and products go through from the Emirates to Saudi Arabia to Jordan to Israel in order to circumvent the blockade in the Red Sea imposed by Yemen and Ansarullah.
Right.
But if the Saudis if they were to become members, then it would put pressure, it would increase the pressure at home. So the Abraham Accords is, those countries that are already have diplomatic relations and trade, and those who are aligned with, remember Erdogan in Egypt, Trump said, whenever I needed him, he was there for me. Right. And Erdogan put his hand on his chest. That says a lot. So that is how these countries in the region are. It's not as if they're going to change in nature by accepting something, but it would be a badge of dishonor.
Oh, that's a really good point. They already work together. What's the difference? And the last one is Iran's relationship with Venezuela. I've seen Russian military equipment go to Venezuela, and I've seen Russians make statements, making the point of saying we need to stand by our allies. And hey, even if that means militarily supporting those allies by sending military equipment and everything else. Is Iran also in that boat? Has Iran been sending any kind of equipment? Has Iran been giving assistance to Venezuela in its fight against the U.S.'s hegemonic objectives in regards to that country?
Well, just like I didn't want to say anything about Iran and Lebanon because I don't want to pretend I'm in government or that I have any,
of course,
information that's like I'm privy to any sort of secret information. I would say the same for Venezuela. However,
that's fair.
It's very open, the relationship between Iran and Venezuela, and
right.
It's clear that Iran has been supporting Venezuela economically and militarily. When the Americans imposed, maximum pressure on Venezuela, Iranian engineers went there. Actually, General Soleimani coordinated that effort. They went there to restart the power plants, if you recall, and also the refineries. They helped them restart them a few years ago when they were in a lot of trouble. So Iran does help Venezuela. It did in the past, and it continues to do so today, militarily, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And just as Iran helps Cuba, there's no doubt about that. These are friendly countries. These are countries that are victims of the empire. And, it's in Iran's constitution. We've discussed this before. As Muslims, but in particularly as Shia, the issue of justice is very, very, very central to Iranian religious culture. And supporting the oppressed is in the Iranian constitution as a result. So supporting the oppressed people without interfering in the internal affairs of other countries is key to Iran's national and religious identity.
Yeah.
So supporting it's clear that Iran, as we speak, will be supporting Venezuela, and it will continue to support Cuba, even though it's not yet directly threatened. But I think the ultimate goal is to take Cuba after Venezuela.
Rubio's nuts. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, but I think that this is going to backfire too, Jamal. Latin America, the Americans succeeded to a large degree in marginalizing Venezuela through the maximum pressure sanctions. A lot of Venezuelans were forced to leave the country. Many of them, of course, became discontent when life is difficult. You start blaming. You blame the government, even though the government may be partially to blame, but a lot of the blame is to be put on the American. It's because of the Americans and their allies. So they put pressure on people to turn them against the government, and people across Latin America see Venezuela's difficulties and all the propaganda against Venezuela, and they sort of turn against them, or at least many did. Now, what the United States is doing is turning Latin America against the United States, and people see that the Americans are murdering civilians, and that they are shamelessly doing so, and now threatening Venezuela. And we know what Venezuela has. It has oil. So now it also has other natural resources. It's a very rich country, and the reason why the Venezuelan economy is not doing well is because the Americans have their boots on their throats. It's like someone strangling you and then laughing at you, saying, "Why can't you breathe? Because you're strangling me." So I don't think this is going to go well for the United States. I don't think the language used towards the people in Nigeria was going to go well. I don't think insulting South Africa is going to be of any help to the United States. Trump is destroying the empire, and he's doing it at a faster rate than his predecessors. And he is a much worse president for the American people than he was during his previous presidencies. So although these are very dangerous times, and none of us like war, but in a sense, the swifter the empire self-destructs, the better.
Yeah, Trump is more honest. That's the way I look at him. I just think he's a more honest reflection.
He's more crude.
Yeah,
he's a thug.
Yeah,
he's just a thug.
Yeah, Professor.
The others were thugs.
Yeah,
but they were like the Godfather. They were more.
They were very refined.
They were more refined. They sat in their offices and let the others do their dirty work. He's just,
Yeah, I just take him as an honest reflection of the way we behave. Like, but
not you or me, but as the elite in the West behave. Yeah. Whether in, I mean, look how the Europeans always try, the elites try to pretend that they're more civilized and they care about human rights. It was wonderful how they gave the Nobel Peace Prize to this Zionist woman.
Yeah.
And to the School of the United States. It shows that the Norwegian regime is another Trump. Maybe a bit more sophisticated, old school still, but the European elites, they're no different. They're all the same as Trump. They're crude monsters who are keen on retaining their global authority that they had for hundreds of years.
Yes.
But they can't do it. Yeah. They can destroy and kill millions in the process, but they'll fail.
Professor Mohammad Marandi, Professor of English Literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran, Professor
Large numbers of Russian troops, armed with motorcycles and other light cavalry vehicles, marched into the entrance to Krasnoarmeysk, where the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine renamed the city Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk has been lost. They entered the area en masse with their main forces, pickup trucks and equipment, in the south, in high-rise buildings. They felt free, while the city was under the cover of fog and bad weather, as shown in a video circulating online on November 11. Ukrainian media panicked, confirming the video of the Russian troop entry, publishing maps and videos, that the Russians are stealthily moving infantry into Pokrovsk from the south, along the E50 highway. Here, Ukrainian media became immersed in erotic memories of the filming location of this epic video, where Russian troops emerge from the fog, determined to press on, while Kiev watches in amazement and can only grumble. Such conditions hampered Ukrainian drone operations, making it difficult to detect and attack Russian movements. Another source for the armed forces of Ukraine added, they entered from the side of the highway leading to Donetsk, towards the M30 highway. The media activist wrote, the weather is very stormy, visibility is poor, and it's a disaster. However, the feelings from this video are mixed, because the weather is the same for everyone, and on the Ukrainian side, in such fog, exactly the same thing is happening. Unless, of course, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Syrsky, gives the order to retreat. The fighting around Pokrovsk is still ongoing. Russia is coming for victory, and no one will stop them now. So, Kiev's forces have been told by Russia to flee, while they still have the chance. In November 2025, as part of a special military operation in Ukraine, soldiers from a Russian assault detachment along with allied units confronted the NATO war machine on the outskirts of Pokrovsk. In the latest footage presented, Russian FPV drone operators released a detailed video of their work. Here, Ukrainian infantry is destroyed. Damage is done to the Gvozdika self-propelled gun, the elimination of a BTR-4 previously disabled by a mine, and the pursuit of Kiev's vehicles. Russia continues its advance step by step, clearing settlements, at least 256 buildings being liberated in one day there. Soon everything will return to normal, and the fall of Pokrovsk is the West's true nightmare.
On November 10th, German journalists from the newspaper Berliner Zeitung published a rather interesting article. It is noteworthy that in this article, German journalists finally admitted that the anti-Russian sanctions that the European Union, Britain, and the United States began to impose en masse, right after the start of the special military operation in Ukraine, not only failed to achieve their goals, but also significantly weakened Europe itself. At the same time, commenting on Europe's strategic mistakes, German journalists did not mince words, calling the EU's sanctions policy the arrogant impotence of Brussels. German journalists are reluctantly admitting that in almost 4 years, since the very beginning of the harsh sanctions campaign against Moscow, Russia has not only not weakened, but also significantly strengthened, having managed to adapt to the new conditions. Furthermore, Moscow's foreign policy has not only not changed, but has also become tougher towards the West, while the Russian economy continues to show steady growth for the third year in a row. For almost 4 years, despite harsh Western sanctions, Russia has managed to adjust supply chains, redirect all financial flows, and reorient oil and gas exports to Asian markets. We have to admit that Russia has not just adapted to harsh Western sanctions, but she is pleased with the current situation. With each passing month, Russia is becoming more self-sufficient, and the range of goods in Russian supermarkets is rapidly expanding. All this has led to the fact that Russians now look at the West with irony, and openly laugh at Europe, the German journalists said. Furthermore, German journalists admitted that Western sanctions, which have always been an instrument of pressure against other countries, have proved powerless against Russia, and have become a symbol of Europe's weakness. At the same time, as a result of this sanctions policy, it was precisely Europe that suffered the heaviest losses. In Europe, energy resources continue to rapidly rise in price. European countries are losing their industries at the speed of light, while inflation is breaking all records, lowering the standard of living of ordinary European citizens. However, this is only the beginning of Europe's major problems. The most shocking consequence of the sanctions policy became Europe's self-isolation. By severing scientific, cultural, and economic ties with Russia, European countries are rapidly losing influence in Asia, Latin America, and the post-Soviet space. All this has led to the fact that Europe has already lost its status as an active participant in strategic geopolitical processes and the formation of a new world order. Simply put, after the arrival of a multipolar world, Europe will be deprived of the opportunity to observe an independent policy. Meanwhile, war correspondents continue to report on the Russian army's new serious achievements on the battlefield. In particular, on the morning of November 11th, war correspondents confirmed that Russian troops had established full control over 3 settlements at once, in the Zaporizhia direction of the front. We are talking about settlements such as Sladkoy, Novoospanskoy, and Novoy. Moreover, Russian telegram channels also report that Russian army units came very close to the settlement of Ravnopoli. Russian troops also continue to achieve significant successes in the Kupiansk direction of the front. So, a few hours ago, it became known that the entire northeastern part of the city had come under the Russian army's full control. As a result, the Ukrainian garrisons in Kucherevka and Zayovsky railway station found themselves in a semicircle. In general, the Ukrainian army's position in Kupiansk is approaching critical. As you can see, Russian troops control most of the city and continue to advance from all sides. At the same time, one Ukrainian group in the western part of the city has already ended up in a full-fledged cauldron. Over the past 24 hours, the Russian army's successes have also been recorded in Myrnograd. War correspondents confirmed that Russian troops finally managed to split the Ukrainian group in Myrnograd into two parts, completely cutting off the southern area of the city. At the same time, it is reported that the days of those Ukrainian soldiers who found themselves in the southern part of the city are numbered, as it is simply impossible to get out of this cauldron. And finally, in Pokrovsk, Russian troops continue to clear the northern part of the city and finish off the encircled Ukrainian group. Against this backdrop, on the morning of November 10th, the Ukrainian General Staff, together with its NATO military advisors, launched another desperate attempt to rescue the encircled Ukrainian units in the Pokrovsk-Myrnograd agglomeration. In particular, recently arrived Ukrainian units from Lviv struck the main blow in the area of settlements Shikovo, Sofiyivka, and Dobropilya. Furthermore, during this counteroffensive, Ukraine even used combat aviation. It is reliably known that two American F-16 fighter jets dropped several gliding aerial bombs on Russian positions. The main goal of the Ukrainian command was to cut off the so-called Dobropilya ledge and surround the Russian group in Kusharov Yar. The Ukrainian command was confident that in the case of success, Pokrovsk would be unblocked, as the Russians would have to send their main forces towards Kusharov Yar. However, unfortunately for the Ukrainian command and its NATO military advisors, this counterattack completely failed. Russian units managed not only to repel all Ukrainian attacks, but also to shoot down 3 Ukrainian warplanes. Were there any American F-16 fighter jets among these destroyed warplanes? Unfortunately, there is still no accurate information on this issue. However, it is worth noting that on the same day, Russian Kinzhal hypersonic missiles rained down on the Starokostiantinov airbase, in the Khmelnytsky region. All this indicates that F-16 fighter jets took off from that airbase and headed towards Pokrovsk direction. In total, as a result of this failed counteroffensive, Ukraine lost 3 combat aircraft, 5 tanks, 8 infantry fighting vehicles, and 160 soldiers. Earlier, numerous sources in the Russian Defense Ministry confirmed that not only Ukrainian commanders, but also several NATO officers are surrounded in the Pokrovsk-Myrnograd agglomeration. Thus, it becomes clear why the Kiev regime and its Western masters are so desperately trying to unblock Pokrovsk, sacrificing hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers.
Response to terrorist attacks on civilian targets. According to the Ministry of Defense, the entire range of weapons was used, including hypersonic aeroballistic missiles Dagger. A record number of these missiles were launched last night. The main target is the Starokonstantinov military airfield in the Khmelnytsky region. Eyewitnesses report that the explosion was so powerful that it was heard in the neighboring Vinnytsia region. Planes with Western Storm Shadow and Scout missiles were based there. Enterprises of the Ukrainian military-industrial complex and facilities of the gas and energy complex that provided their work were also affected. In addition, the Ukrainian Army's Electronic Intelligence Center, warehouses with multiple rocket launchers for the Alka rocket launcher system, as well as assembly and storage sites for long-range Ukrainian drones were destroyed. The air alert sounded in Sumy, Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Dnipropetrovsk, Kherson, and other regions. Kamikaze drones Geranium attacked the Orelka railway station This node is critically important for supplying the enemy group in the Kharkiv region and in the Donbass. There is a collapse in the Ukrainian energy system. The Ukrainian company Syrianews reports that all state-owned thermal power plants have been shut down. There is a blackout in Kyiv and other major cities of Ukraine. Power outages are valid for 12 hours and will last for several weeks. The Times writes that Ukraine's energy system lost 30 gigawatts of power at one time. This is half of Ukraine's pre-war electricity generation. The results of these strikes are catastrophic. First of all, for Kyiv's military potential. The restoration of the facilities will take many months. The Russian army is defeating the enemy in all directions of the front. The Russian Ministry of Defense reports that military units of the East Group have liberated the settlements of Sladko and Novaya in the Zaporizhia region, taking control of more than 25 square kilometers of territory. The Kupian assault detachments of the 6th Army continue to defeat the blocked enemy group. 3 attacks by Ukrainian military units and the National Guard from Blagodatovka and Petrovka, which tried to block the militants, were repelled. 244 buildings were vacated in the Pokrovsk area during the day. The Russian army repelled 7 counterattacks by Ukrainian formations from the Grishin area and thwarted 2 attempts by the 425th Skala Assault Regiment to break out of the encirclement. Also, on the outskirts of Pokrovsk, units of the 1,435th Motorized Rifle Regiment of the 2nd Army liberated the village of Natovka from Ukrainian militants. Breaking news. All Russian nuclear missiles and launchers transferred to Belarus have been upgraded. Now Minsk, like Moscow, has the most modern tactical nuclear arsenal in the world. As Lukashenko said today, he also informed where the Orshnik missile systems will be deployed on the territory of Belarus. They will enter combat duty in December, very soon. Since this missile system is mobile, it will be constantly moved. It will change its location in order to strike, if necessary. We hope this will not happen. From the most advantageous position, the European Union will not be able to replenish the coffers of the Kiev regime and the pockets of its functionaries at the expense of Russian assets. There is no consensus on the confiscation, or more precisely, on the theft of our assets. Brussels is turning to blackmail. According to the Financial Times, the Europeans were explicitly told that if they refused to transfer Russian money to Zelensky, the money of Russian teachers, doctors, firefighters, and police officers, money from national budgets would be used. This is at least 5.5 billion euros per year. Slovakia strongly opposes this, and Slovak Prime Minister Fico called such actions incitement to war. He stressed that by allocating another 140 billion euros to Ukraine, which is how much of our Russian funds are stored in the depositories of Belgium, the EU will prolong hostilities for at least 2 years. French fishermen are actively prolonging the agony of the Ukrainian army. According to The Guardian, they are sending old fishing nets to the Ukrainian front, which Ukrainians are trying to use to protect themselves from Russian drones. Against this background, Washington is demonstrating its readiness for dialogue with Moscow. Hungarian Prime Minister Orbán said that he had held successful talks with Trump, during which he confirmed that he was ready to mediate at the upcoming summit with Putin. As Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov noted, Moscow expects Washington to confirm previously reached agreements, including recognition of the results of referendums in Crimea and Donbass. Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that the conflict can end only after achieving the goals initially set by Moscow, stressing Russia's openness to a political and diplomatic settlement. And we just received a message from Reuters. U.S. Secretary of State Rubio and the foreign ministers of the G7 countries will discuss peace in Ukraine tomorrow.
The conflict could have been prevented, former NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg admitted. He sees the mistake of the North Atlantic Alliance not in its expansion to the Russian border, nor in its unwillingness to engage in dialogue with Moscow. On the contrary, this Norwegian believes that the West should have pumped weapons into Ukraine earlier and more actively. Austrian Colonel Reisner compares the war in Ukraine to a boxing match. The Russian boxer has pinned his opponent to the ropes and is about to knock him out.
What we are seeing in Ukraine is the 8th round of a boxing match. We have seen what the Russian boxer is doing. He failed at the beginning of the fight, but boxing continues round after round, and we are increasingly noticing that the Russian fighter is pursuing a strategy of attrition. And this is very important to understand, because if you look at the Russian fighter here, you may know him. This is Nikolai Valuev, and he won all his fights not due to techniques, but he won due to his size. He just threw all his weight at his opponents, and because of that, he won most of his fights. 48 out of 50 fights to be exact.
The European Commission has said that if EU countries do not approve the transfer of Russian assets to Kiev, they will have to fork out to service their common debt. In total, they will have to allocate 5.6 billion euros per year. Belgium, which opposes the confiscation of Russian assets for fear of Moscow's response, will pay 200 million euros. Slovakia also does not agree to transfer Russian money to Kiev. Without the theft of Russian assets, the flow of Western military aid is weakening. The Guardian publishes a whole story about how the old nets of French fishermen helped the Ukrainian army defend itself from drones. The American shutdown is also causing a blow to Kiev. Most of the employees of the State Bureau of Military and Political Affairs were sent on vacation, and the supply of American weapons to NATO countries, including Ukraine, had to be frozen. At the meeting with Orban, Trump confirms his readiness to meet with Putin in Budapest. What caused it, and whether Orban influenced the situation, is not known for certain, but the American administration has indeed and consistently begun to demonstrate its willingness to engage in dialogue with Moscow. Lavrov said that the normalization of relations between the two countries is being hindered by Brussels and London, which, together with Zelensky, are trying to put pressure on Washington. The Kiev regime has stopped negotiations because the Europeans are encouraging it, convincing it that Ukraine can win on the battlefield, which is a deep misconception. Kiev's situation is getting worse every day, the Kremlin said. Hungarian Prime Minister Orban has not yet informed Putin about the results of his visit to Washington. The Kremlin does not know what ideas on the Ukrainian settlement he conveyed to Donald Trump. Orban, the mediator between Moscow and Washington, leaves the White House with a diplomatic victory. Fuel via the Turkish Stream and Druzhba gas pipelines will continue to flow to Hungary.
We have come to the conclusion that Hungary is in a completely different situation than other European countries. It will be impossible to ensure energy supplies for Hungary and affordable energy for Hungarian families and businesses if sanctions are imposed on two key pipelines. We have studied this issue, and we have asked the US president to lift the sanctions. We have asked that two pipelines be excluded from all sanctions.
Hungary has obtained permission from the United States to purchase oil and gas from Moscow, and the lifting of sanctions against the Russian PAX-2 NPP project. In response, Orban pledged to purchase weapons, liquefied natural gas, and nuclear fuel from the Americans. The Reuters news agency, citing an official from the White House, claims that an exception has been made for Budapest for 1 year. Hungarian Foreign Minister Szijjártó publicly denies this fake. According to him, the exemption from sanctions is indefinite.
Hungary is a great country. It's a big country, but they don't have a sea or ports. Therefore, they have a really difficult problem. But if we look at Europe, many other countries don't have such problems. But they buy a lot of oil and gas from Russia, and that worries me a lot.
Budapest purchases 86% of oil and 74% of gas from Moscow, and there is no alternative to these supplies. The Baltic countries claim that they have managed to abandon Russian energy sources completely, and they are attacking their European Union partners who have not yet done so.
Donald Trump wiped the floor by Ursula von der Leyen. He forced the president of the European Commission to agree to an agreement that is fantastic for Americans and shameful for Europeans. The agreement between Orban and Trump shows even more clearly than before that Ursula von der Leyen and many Western European politicians are completely unable to cope with their task because Prime Minister Orban went to the United States and concluded an agreement that was mutually beneficial.
Soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth.
Traitors, cowards, capitulators, collaborators, fakes, frauds, enablers, betrayers, failures, political prostitutes.
My colleagues in independent media who are also beside themselves, some with grief, some with surprise, some are shocked at what took place.
They f***ed us.
Holy am I fired up and ready to go today. The elephant in the room, the huge story is that yet again, we were betrayed by Democratic leadership.
Very Israeli coded Trump using food as a weapon of war here, basically against the Democrats. And for these 8, losers, basically, it worked. I mean, it is utterly pathetic. It is utterly pathetic.
Right now was when Democrats had the leverage to force the Obamacare subsidies into the bill right now.
Like the most amount of leverage they could possibly have.
They gave up their leverage, and now our healthcare costs are going to go up because of what they did.
If they need your votes, and they do, well, I'm sorry, you have all the power. So you could have said the Obamacare subsidies go in full, or you don't get any of our votes. But they didn't say that. Why?
They took that opportunity to cave.
You completely bended, completely caved, demonstrated to the American people that you will not stand on business on anything.
Chuck Schumer betrayed us.
Chuck Schumer needs to be primaried. Hakeem Jeffries needs to be primaried. Out.
These people never fight for anything. Many of them have been looking for a way to cave from the beginning, by the way.
I think that they were already planning to capitulate, but they wanted to wait until after the election so that way their base wouldn't be too pissed off before they cast their votes.
Oh, say it ain't so. Say it ain't so. No, I simply refuse to believe that the Democrats would willfully lie to their own voters, and the white ones at that. I simply refuse to accept that when called upon to stand on principle, they would instead fold like hot laundry. After all, we have Democrat shills and plants in our comment sections and social media all the time, carpet bombing us with hate, saying that the Democrats would never lie to us, that they really love us, and that they're the only ones standing up to the orange man. Well, don't look now, but the Democrats just caved in and Trump didn't have to lift a finger or say a single word. How ironic, because just last week, the Democrats were celebrating. Last week's election saw Democrats run the boards and they were cheering as the white right was crashing out and nutting up on the results. The white right knew that they were facing an uphill battle next year. That's why the Texas legislature pulled their radical redrawing of the district map there. But Democrats were obviously riding a wave of political momentum that was setting the stage for the 2026 midterm victory they're anticipating. For the last week now, I've been seeing people throw around words like wipeout and other superlatives to describe what they think is a blue wave that's coming. At least that's what the Democrats and their online mouthpieces were talking like last week. And they were right. Last week was indeed setting the stage for what Democrats would do, just not the way that they hoped. Remember how last week Barack Obama and others were saying, you got to vote for Abigail Spanberger. We got to make her the next governor of Virginia. Well, she won her race. And that was one of the big feathers in the cap of the Democrats last week. But no sooner than they called the election for her than she immediately said, the government's been shut down long enough. And just because the Democrats ran the boards, just because we had a big victory, that's no reason to prolong the shutdown. We need to go ahead and wind this up. So right after the Democrats had their huge victory, which they were saying was confirmation that the country was with them and against the Republicans, and even Trump's knees were knocking on that one. But at that moment, when the Democrats scored a huge major political victory, which seemed to portend what's going to happen next year, that's the very moment that Abigail Spanberger, who's not even in office yet, she had merely won office, hadn't even gotten in yet, but she's already saying, those folk in D.C., those Democrats in D.C., they need to go ahead and bring an end to this. Time to go ahead and call this one off. We don't need to prolong this anymore. This woman didn't get elected to the Senate. She didn't get elected to the House. She's a governor-elect. So what the hell is she doing talking about the shutdown in D.C. as if she has the ability to cast a vote on it or anything, as if anyone should listen to her? What that tells you is the party leadership made it clear to her, we'll go ahead and support your election for governor, but when Chuck Schumer says we want to wind this thing down, you need to go ahead and be the first one to take the arrows for us. Go ahead and be the first one to break the ice on that not so popular suggestion. This is what Abigail Spanberger, one of the big winners from last Tuesday's election, was saying 24 hours before those Senate Democrats caved in. Now, do you truly believe that this woman, still basking in the glow of her victory last week, she takes an opportunity to speak on the shutdown, and she says that the Democrats are the ones who need to cut it short. The Democrats are the ones who don't need to be prolonging this. Instead of wagging her finger at the Republicans and saying, you guys are in charge, you messed up the country, and my election is proof that America's not with you. You guys need to stop prolonging the shutdown. Instead, she tells Democrats they're the ones who need to bring an end to it. Somebody put a bug in her ear and let her know she needs to break the ice on this one. They need her to be the first person to step across that line just so we can get it out there. Somebody's got to be the first one to do it, so it might as well be you. And besides, in a few years, when you're ready to run for higher office, we'll go ahead and remember the favor that you did for us. For the last 6 weeks now, there's been a shutdown of the U.S. federal government, and the main sticking point happens to be with subsidy vouchers for Obamacare. Apparently, the Republicans and Donald Trump are trying to make good on their promise that they were going to gut it one way or the other. And so the Democrats are basically holding out to see if the Republicans, since they're actually in control of the government, would have enough pressure put on them by voters that they would back down. Well, instead, it's the Democrats who, after their crushing victory last week, they were the ones to throw in the towel. 8 Democratic senators, who conveniently are not up for re-election next year, they decided they would be the ones to make a deal with the Republicans and call an end to the shutdown and go ahead and serve up Obamacare as a consolation prize to the GOP. Now, why did they do it? The same reason that they do everything. The donors who put them in office were saying they wanted to get back to making outrageous profits instead of the normal sickening profits that they've been reduced to during the shutdown. And where was Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader, while all this was going on? As the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, who vowed that he was going to fight the encroaching fascism of Trump and the MAGA right, clearly he wouldn't be the one to actually sign off on this. He didn't even know it was happening, right? Well, according to those same senators who had sided with the Republicans, they had been keeping Schumer informed of what they were doing the entire time.
Senator Chuck Schumer, your leader on the Senate, said, I cannot support a continuing resolution that fails to address health care. I am voting no. Did you do this outside leadership, and was there a big push for you not to join the others and break the 60 threshold?
No, we kept leadership informed throughout.
So no matter what Schumer may try to tell you, he knew all about this. His public performance where he's acted like he didn't know that this was coming, that was all political theater. This is who these black Democratic shills tell us to vote for, by the way. These are the people who these shills tell us are the only ones sticking up for us, the only ones fighting to keep America free. Well, those black Democrat shills are quiet now, aren't they? Why? Because this was so embarrassing and humiliating to the white leftists that they're openly calling for Schumer to resign. And so the black mouthpieces are not doing the usual, well, this is disappointing, but we gots to remembers that the parties gots to stays united now because the Republicans is worse. The Democrats, the only ones gonna fight. Yeah, they showed exactly how much fight they've got in them. None at all. And something else that also needs to be mentioned. I've been telling you for the longest time how the white media was going to be using that word moderate. They were going to be using that word to an orgiastic degree, moderate. That's what they were going to use to sanitize and whitewash anybody who's out here doing all this dirt. Anyone who's out here stumping for the establishment and against actual justice, they're going to say these people are moderates. And that's what they're saying about these guys, using the word moderate over and over again. These guys are moderates.
It's been widely assumed that the group of 8, mostly centrist Senate Democrats,
That's gaslighting the public. They are literally trying to rewrite the dictionary. They are literally trying to tell you that up is down and down is up. They're trying to tell you that a bunch of extremists are actually moderates. This is them trying to conjure magic. You're taking people who are extremists for the establishment, people who are diehard in the wool shills and bootlicks and scumbags and suck-ups to power, saying that these guys are moderates when they're the biggest extremists in the country. These guys boldly have gotten in the public's faces. They caused this catastrophe. They've made it where lives are jeopardized through the airlines not being safe. And here they are ready to blow up the economy and do all of this mess just to make sure that a few billionaires continue to enjoy their tax-free status. They're willing to crash the entire country for that. These guys are willing to see people starving if necessary, as long as their billionaire donors get what they want. And these are moderates? No, these are extremists. But then again, look at who it is who owns the white media who bestows the title of moderate on these guys. That's the reason why you got all of these white media types who want to eat up as much of the landscape as possible. You got to control as many white media outlets as possible, because that's how you control the public mind. The white media, which is sponsored by the same bad actors who the Democrats depend on for campaign donations, are gaslighting the public, telling them that all of you discontent people, you're the minority. Nobody actually wants what you people are demanding. In fact, your demands are what loses elections. All lies, of course. But what's been really interesting to me for the last 24 hours or so is how the kind of talk that the black media has been doing all along when it comes to the Democrats, and which we've been told makes us Russian bots. Now, after so many years as lone voices in the wilderness, this week we're seeing these online white Democrat mouthpieces who are saying the same things we've always said, that the Democrats are controlled opposition. Democrats play the shell game of changing who gets the blame this week so that no one Democrat has to become the bad guy. They're playing both ends against the middle and playing the public for suckers. They can keep carrying water for established power and they don't care. The black media has been the only ones who have been saying that there is no sane reason to vote for the Democrats, that they're lying about what they claim they can't do. It's all political theater to trick the gullible and the willfully stupid into sitting on their hands while they make sure established power gets what it wants. Democrat shills, on the other hand, have always said, well, there's nothing they can do. They don't have the numbers in Congress. But next time, if we votes real goods, next time they're going to do something. The black grassroots told you that it was all a pack of lies, and yet these white leftists and their black mouthpieces tried to shout us down to attack us. And now this week, though, they're all sounding exactly like us. We said that the Democrats were the ones lying and that we weren't accepting any excuses. And these shills and plants and ops, they were the ones who said it wasn't true. And now we've piled up enough examples and kept a running tally on the lies and who told those lies, to the point that these professional excuse makers began to become more reluctant to tell their lies because people were throwing their lies in their faces and saying, here's the receipts. And as I told you, that's how you know that they've admitted defeat. They're never going to say the black media was right all along. That's not going to happen. So stop looking for a confession. It ain't coming. But as their position continues to erode, at some point they're going to have to change what they're saying because it's simply too ridiculous to continue as if everything is everything. That's the reason why this week those mouthpieces have egg on their faces and they're sitting here going, well, I don't know if I want to support the Democrats after this. Now, some of them are talking about primarying the 8 senators in question when it should be obvious that they were merely the henchmen for the Democratic leadership. If it wasn't these 8 senators, it would have been someone else because in the past, it has been others. The phrase revolving villains has come up, and that describes the tactic that Democrats have been using. Don't let just one Democrat become the focus of the base's anger. You have to spread it around. Have it be these 3 or 4 congressmen who make a dubious deal with the GOP today, then this or that senator tomorrow who casts a vote that shoots down a key piece of legislation tomorrow, and then this other group of senators who side with the Republicans during a shutdown the next month. People will think that these are just a bunch of coincidences, just a few confused members of a political party that struggles to remain consistent. But it's not. As the black media has always told you, this is the Democratic Party's position on the issues. The fact that this keeps happening over and over again, that's the only consistent thing about the Democrats. This is not a matter of people who just don't get it. This is a political party showing you that this is exactly how they operate. They know precisely what it is that they're doing. They're trying to use basically a political shell game, have a whole bunch of people in front of you telling you that they're going to stand for something when they already know they're lying to you, all of it to confuse you. What you saw in D.C. was a larger, more expensive version of the kind of political ops that we saw in places like California, where the Black Assembly Caucus literally laughed and smiled in the faces of their own Black constituents as they blocked reparations legislation. And then predictably, it came to light that Gavin Newsom was the one who put them up to it. He was the ringleader, or should I say overseer, the whole time. This is not just something they do in DC. This is the Democratic Party. And this is why we as the Black grassroots have told you it makes no sense to vote for them. And if you needed to wait until the Democrats' latest flip-flop on the shutdown to see the truth, it's not because the evidence wasn't there. It's because you thought these white Democrats you like so much were on your side. And because they said, oh, this isn't deliberate on the Democrats' part. It's just the usual party dysfunction. A lot of Black folks went along with that phony narrative because there are a lot of Black folks who are shills and plants in my comments section. And a lot of them hope to get a job from these same Democrats. They know what they've been covering up for. You want to be on their campaign staff? You want to get a job in their administration or a so-called consulting gig? You get them on your podcast so you can start clout chasing. That's what the motivation is. That's why I point out the Simone Sanders and the Angela Rise with lettuce and tomatoes on the side. They're all auditioning for a job, and the audition is to prove that they can corral us and lead us around by the nose. The hypocrisy and spinelessness of the Democratic Party leadership directly reflects the hypocrisy of their own mouthpieces. They refuse to accept the reality that Black demands are the way to get the Democratic Party to finally start acting like an opposition party again. The Republicans are all about transformative policies, they put it, which actually means hyper-aggressive plots to try to turn the clock back 200 plus years. Well, where the hell are the Democrats at with their transformative policies? They don't have any, and they're not trying to present any. Only a political party that is willing to show the moral courage and the intellectual muscle to push real policies, that's the only political party that'll actually be willing to stand on business. And the only example of that kind of policy runs straight through the Black community. There is no substitute for that. If the Democrats aren't willing to stand up for the pig simple common sense policies that Black America needs, then you're a fool if you expect them to stand on anything else. The purest evidence of this is to ask yourself, when was the last time the Democrats as a party truly stood for any substantive or even meaningful policies? You have to go all the way back to the 60s for that one. Since then, they've been running as fast as they could to suck up to the same donor class as the Republicans. That's just the facts. And for you Black leftists who lurk around here, you better get it through your heads that these white leftists you're putting on the cape for are going to get what they want regardless of what happens to you. They get to have their cake and eat yours too. Remember when Clarence Thomas said that after Roe v. Wade was overturned, that he wanted the Supreme Court to revisit the Dobbs decision that legalized gay marriage next? Well, it seems that Uncle Thomas doesn't have the support that he thought he had for that one, because yesterday the right-wing supermajority Supreme Court declined to take up any lawsuit regarding the Dobbs decision. They said they won't be revisiting that ruling after all. So while Black survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre are being denied their legal rights, and Democrats are doing nothing and saying nothing about that, meanwhile, white leftist issues are being respected and protected. So it's easy to see what their real priority is. So with the Democrats having shown their true colors for the umpteenth time, I have to wonder who's going to be the next Democrat shill to come out of the woodwork and try to lecture us about how we have to vote for the Democrats. Who's going to try that one with us now? They don't see Black empowerment as a Democratic issue. That's the problem with the Democrats. Instead, they say it's just people's issues, you know. Or like Kamala Harris, you think I'm going to do something that only benefits Black people? No. And what she made very clear was they're not going to do anything that benefits anyone other than themselves. Well, I'll agree with them on one thing. Black empowerment is not a Democratic Party issue, and that's the reason why I'm not a Democratic voter. Now, when Democrats pull their heads out of the sand, or wherever else they got their heads tucked, and decide that maybe Black empowerment is a Democratic issue, we can talk at that time. But until then, all of you DNC shills, agents, and cheerleaders who have made a career out of trying to discredit the Black media, nice to see you talking like us for a change. But I think you'll agree that since you were this wrong for this long, instead of talking, you just need to shut up. Good day and be one. I'd like to take a moment.
Are going to join us in trying to address healthcare costs for Americans.
I expect Republicans to be at the table in the next few weeks. I expect the White House to be at the table. And if they do choose not to come to the table, they can own the disastrous premium increases that will continue to rise.
Will they? Well, each of those three senators, that's Independent Angus King and Democrats Jeanne Shaheen and Catherine Cortez Masto, decided to break ranks with the Democratic caucus to bring an end to the government shutdown. And they did so without getting any concessions from the Republican Party, including the effort to extend the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, which would prevent premiums from doubling. So it appears that premiums will be doubling. And Cenk, I'm sure you've got some 2 cents about this.
Yeah, to say the least. So look, guys, I'm going to rip into these guys in a minute, and obviously it's the wrong thing to do. We'll explain why in a second. But I don't. That's part of it. The more interesting part of it is why the different reaction? Because Democrats surrender for a living. We've been showing it to you for 20 years straight on this show. But this time around, the Democratic voters had a very different reaction. What was it and why? I want to get into that too.
Well, let's get to the substance of the vote itself. And to be clear, I think my opinion on this is a little different from the whole of the Democratic constituency. So I'll explain how in just a minute. But here's what you need to know about yesterday's Senate vote. So the vote passed 60-40. And that's what you need, right? You have a legislative filibuster. You need at least 60 votes in the Senate for anything to pass. But it was a procedural vote, and it's not going to bring an end to the shutdown per se. There are still other steps that the Senate needs to pass in order for the government shutdown to end. So the Senate still needs to hold several more votes to ultimately pass a bill that would actually fund the government. And then after that, the House would need to pass the legislation as well. Now, there were 8 Democrats in the Senate who broke ranks with the party in order to vote in favor of this procedural vote. And those Democrats include Senator Dick Durbin, Senator John Fetterman, the most unsurprising vote, if you ask me. You also have Maggie Hassan, Tim Kaine from Virginia, whose vote I think I can understand a little more, especially considering the fact that so many people living in Virginia are federal employees, so they were particularly harmed as a result of the government shutdown. You also have Angus King, who is an independent, but he typically caucuses with the Democrats, Senator Catherine Cortez Mastro, Senator Jackie Rosen, and finally Senator Jeanne Shaheen. And it is worth noting that none of those senators are up for re-election in 2026, meaning, there's this rotating group of the bad guys in the Democratic Party, or the ones who are willing to raise their hands and be the so-called bad guys, because it's not really politically harmful for them to do so. And in this case, none of those 8 senators are up for re-election in 2026. In fact, 2 of them are retiring. The others won't face re-election until 2028 or 2030. And you should also keep in mind that Senator Rosen accepted nearly $1 million in healthcare PAC money, including from insurance companies last election cycle. And Senator Tim Kaine welcomed more than $700,000 in health political action committee cash. Cenk.
Yeah, so later we're going to get to why the timing on this too, but I just wanted to make a comment real quick that if you don't know about how Senate politics and congressional politics overall work, they do the rotating villains, as Anna mentioned, because they want to pretend that they're on your side, but they're actually on the side of the Republicans and the corporate donors. So that's why they rotate the villains, and the people that are rotated in are usually don't have an election coming up. They're either retiring or they're going to come. It's going to come later, so that people forget to be angry with them when they come up for a re-election later. And the people leaving also get to be lobbyists really soon, so they're going to collect millions of dollars for this vote. This has nothing to do with the Democratic voters. It has everything to do with the corporate donors who demanded this. And then in a minute, we're going to explain to you how they planned this surrender all along. Not just Chuck Schumer, who's definitely guilty, but maybe the entire caucus.
So last night's vote allegedly guarantees that the Senate will in fact hold a vote on the healthcare subsidies before the second week of December. But you should also keep in mind that House Speaker Mike Johnson has stated that he's not committed to bringing that issue up for a vote. So keep that in mind. Even if the Senate holds the vote, even if somehow the Senate passes legislation that would extend the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, there's no guarantee that House Speaker Mike Johnson will do that. And I should also remind you all, we're currently in the middle of open enrollment, meaning many Americans have already signed up for their health insurance in the coming year. So it is quickly becoming far too late for the extension of the Affordable Care Act subsidies, and Americans are going to pay far more for their health insurance as a result of that. Now, Republicans will get their way in essentially screwing over the American people by allowing healthcare premiums to double in an already inflationary economy. In addition, SNAP will be funded through next September. Thousands of federal workers who were fired during the shutdown will now get their jobs back. And there can't be any more layoffs of federal workers until next year in January. Back pay will also be guaranteed for the hundreds of thousands of federal workers who were furloughed during the shutdown. And to get a little deeper into the weeds of this issue, the agreement contains a minibus, 3 full-year appropriations bills that will fund certain departments like the agriculture department through the end of the fiscal year next fall, and a continuing resolution to fund the rest of the government at existing spending levels through January 30th. Now, before we get to the Democratic outrage, I just want to get your thoughts overall, Cenk, on how the Democrats have handled this, because I'm actually a little bit surprised at how furious Democratic voters are.
Interesting. Why? Why are you furious? Because this is a typical surrender, right? We covered this particular play like 100 times.
We have covered similar issues 100 times where it was a surrender and they didn't get anything at all. And sure, in this case, they're not getting anything at all. Republicans are not going to extend the subsidies. They don't care. They don't care about the suffering of the American people. So the longer the government shutdown lasts, people are going to suffer as a result of SNAP. As we know, Trump was hell-bent and he went to the courts to ensure that the federal government wouldn't tap into reserve funds in order to make SNAP recipients whole. So there's going to be a lot of suffering in that regard. Obviously, a lot of employees at airports across this country have been calling in sick because they haven't been getting paid, whether it's TSA, air traffic controllers. So air travel has been a complete and utter disaster. That has an massive impact on our economy. And I just don't know what the plan would be for Democrats if they insisted on keeping this fight going, knowing full well Republicans don't care about you. They don't care about the subsidies. They don't want to extend the subsidies. And they also don't care about people going hungry when they need the SNAP benefits.
Yeah, okay, so you're not alone. Charlemagne the God said something similar to you, like people are in too much pain. And same thing is happening for him as us. You guys are emailing in, writing in, calling in, whatever, and all these shows and saying, oh my God, I'm so badly hurt because of these developments. We 100% get it. So the people who hurt you in those cases are, in this case, us, we're fair, and when Trump or the Republicans do something right, or 98 out of 100 times when the Democrats do something wrong, we call it out for you guys. But in this case, it was definitely the Republicans. So Trump has said, I'm cutting SNAP to punish the Democrats. In fact, he's still cutting SNAP, even though they have this agreement. Since it hasn't passed, they're in the courts right now. The Trump administration is saying, we demand to cut SNAP. So there's no, don't blame Democrats. That is 100% lie. Anyone saying Democrats want to cut SNAP. It is definitely Trump, and Democrats are fighting against it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna call out the Democrats in a second, but you have to be right on the facts. Okay, so now on the doubling of the premiums. So again, the Democrats had I thought a good strategy, and you did too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So they said, look, we're not gonna let your premiums double. And Trump and the Republicans were like, no, we're gonna make them double, right? Now I know they did the usual propaganda about, it is the Democrats' fault for it doubling because they did the shutdown. Which, by the way, the one upside of this, I acknowledge what you're saying, Anna, is that it takes that excuse away.
Right.
So now we're gonna have a vote, and the Republicans are all going to vote to double your premiums because they're corporate whores who work for the insurance companies while pretending to be populist. Sure.
Agreed.
Republican voters are a different phenomenon. Republican politicians are the worst of the worst.
Can I weigh in on that just very briefly? My heart breaks for Republican voters because understand, guys, this doubling of healthcare premiums, it's going to impact all voters, including those who trusted Trump, trusted that the Republican Party was being, sincere and earnest in their fake populism. Same with the SNAP benefits. If you look at the demographics and the voting base that's hurt the most as a result of the SNAP benefits getting taken away as a result of the government shutdown, it's mostly Trump's voters. And some people are like, hey, well, too bad you voted for Trump, you deserve it. No, these are our fellow Americans. We should not be thinking about retaliation and political punishment against ordinary people just because they voted differently from us. What I'm furious about, though, is that this whole fight has made it abundantly clear to me that the Republican Party, including Donald Trump, the same guy who insisted on his signature being on those COVID stimulus checks, He's not up for re-election, so he couldn't care less about you. In the meantime, the bombs and the military aid and all of that going to foreign countries, that hasn't stopped. There hasn't been any debate about that. But when it comes to taxpayer money helping our fellow Americans, they have no problem depriving you of public programs that you need to survive.
Yeah, so it might affect Republican voters more, and I agree 100% with you. It's not the time for ha-ha, okay? But at the same time, Republican voters, you have to realize what the facts are. And the facts are Trump unilaterally said he was taking SNAP away. The courts told him he can't, and he's still in court today demanding to be able to cut SNAP.
Right.
To punish you for what? You didn't do anything wrong. And SNAP normally does not get cut in government shutdowns. This is unprecedented. He definitely did this, and the Democrats are definitely opposed to it.
Right.
For all the criticism you can have. All right, now to answer your original question, Anna. So what else could the Democrats do? Well, their strategy actually, ironically, was working, and I think that's part of what made them panic. Because Trump was a cold, sweaty tooth madman. He's in a cold sweat, and he was going around going, the Democrats are doing this, and they're gonna make it, and he's like, this hurt us, it hurt us in the election. So he was being very, very clear that the Republicans were in trouble.
Right.
And the Democrats are like, because the play is, guys, good cop, bad cop. So for a lot of people that watch mainstream media, the bad cops are the Republicans, the good cops are the Democrats. But it's Harlem Globetrotters and the Washington Generals. The Democrats are supposed to surrender. I think the Democratic caucus panicked because Trump was getting killed here, okay, politically. And so like you think, what do you mean? The Democrats are opposed to Trump and the Republicans? No, they're not. No, they're giant liars.
Really?
Enormous liars. And so I think that they thought, we gotta end this, But there's a giant second factor, which is the stock market, which I'm gonna get to in a second.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
But Anna, here's why the entire caucus was in on it, okay? Because they brought it to the caucus on Thursday.
Yes, I know. So you're right about that. Like Chuck Schumer, he voted no, but Chuck Schumer voted no because he's politically vulnerable. But he's the one who agreed to bring this up for a vote in the first place.
Yeah, no, Chuck Schumer 100% knew, but the entire caucus knew.
Yeah.
Now there's reports out that the caucus was furious on Thursday night when these 8 and originally 10 Democrats were suggesting this, right? But then conveniently they found the 8 people who are not up for re-election in the next cycle.
Right.
The caucus did that together. And no one leaked from that caucus. No one said these sons of bitches are gonna sell us out. Conveniently, they let them do it and then feign anger afterwards. Oh, golly gee, we had the Republicans on the ropes. I can't believe they let them off. Wink. Why do you rotate the villains? The reason to rotate them is because you never meant anything you promised to your voters. So you have to make sure that your voters don't get really angry at you while you secretly do the donor agenda. Right? So now the biggest thing is, it's not that the Democratic senators are in love with Donald Trump and they're trying to protect his reputation. It's that they always have to let the Republicans win. So the core issue is why? Why do they always have to let the Republicans win?
And what makes you think that they do?
Okay, so in this case, the timing is critical. So the entire caucus waits till after the election. Now, why did they wait till after the election? If they thought it was hurting the Democrats, they would have acted before the election.
Yes, that's true.
So they knew with absolute certainty that this was advantaging the Democrats.
Right, politically.
The shutdown,
yes.
Politically. It was disadvantaging Trump and the Republicans, but right after the election, they surrendered anyway.
That's
okay?
right, that was to be expected, to be honest with you.
And I don't think anyone's really covering this, and you need to understand about the timing. So you see why it's after the election. So why now though? Because Thanksgiving is coming up and people need money to shop. So all those companies are yelling at all the senators going, you better open it back up. They need money to send to me, okay?
I know.
You losers, do your job. We paid you, we bribed all of you. Open the goddamn thing back up. Because if they get close enough to Thanksgiving and the holidays and Black Friday, it's going to massively affect the stock market.
You're totally right about that, absolutely. But you also have to consider that Americans are going to suffer as we get closer to the holidays. I know,
but Anna,
right?
if you look, we have a poll on TYT.com, and one of the choices as to why this is a bad idea was the precedent that it sets. Okay.
Democrats have set this precedent like decades ago at this point.
No, I got
this
you.
This is who the Democrats are.
I
Right?
know.
But this is one of the rare instances in which, I honestly think this is one of the rare instances in which the Republicans were unwilling to budge. They don't care.
I know, but then
So
this is a
what-
rare time, Anna.
So what's the strategy? Like,
Okay,
explain to me how
yeah.
it would ideally play out in your mind, because I want to understand. I really do. It's not like I'm looking to defend the Democrats. If anything, I'm the one who's overly critical of the Democrats, according to our audience. So explain to me the proper way of handling this.
Yeah, so first of all, if you're gonna do this strategy and you're gonna have it last all this time,
right?
You've got to finish it. If you don't finish it, what you signal to Republicans is, we will always surrender. You just wait us out. Just wait us out, and I guarantee you we will never do anything we promised our voters, ever. We serve you more loyally than we serve our voters. So now the Republicans, for as long as this term lasts, at a minimum, let alone forever, no, oh yeah, you can call any Democratic bluff. Okay, there are bitches. So now when we go to do any bill, any negotiation, we just wait them out. Because these losers will eventually collapse right in front of our feet. Okay, so that's a guarantee. That's it. All our leverage is gone because the Republicans. But to be fair, they already know. So the big question that you're asking, Anna, is the giant difference between this one, or this surrender, and the 100 other ones you and I have covered together.
Right.
Is mainstream media is unable to. The walls have been breached. They're unable to contain the damage. Because normally what happens in these is mainstream media then comes in and goes, bravo on the bipartisan compromise. These brave Democrats did an amazing job of putting country and America above politics. Bravo, Democrats, surrender again and again. We love you. And they never call this surrender, etc. But hold on, Anna.
No one's answering my question. Republicans are not going to budge. They're not. They don't care. They don't care.
Hold on,
So
hold
what
on.
do
I'm
you
getting
do?
to that. I'm getting to that.
Okay.
So mainstream media would normally say cover up the crime, and so we would move on, and they'd get applause for it. Now the reason they're not getting applause for it, and the Democratic base is so angry that even Gavin Newsom and Pete Buttigieg are pretending to be angry, and they're like, "Oh, this was wrong," right? So why? Because now online media is dominant. So even for not just Republican voters, we talked a lot about how Republican voters are now getting their news from online and not mainstream media, not Fox News, but online content, and it's making them change their opinion on Israel. Now all of a sudden lowering drug prices, lowering housing prices, etc. right? But that's also happening for Democratic voters. Democratic voters used to blindly follow mainstream media way more than Republicans did, right? So if mainstream media told them, great job by Schumer, they go, oh, great job by Schumer. And whenever we criticize Schumer, you remember all the like libs would come in and go, oh, you guys are working with the Republicans. If you kiss Schumer's ass enough, we would have, etc. right? But they're not doing that this time because they're getting their news from online media. So then what do knowing that phenomenon? You hold strong and you send out every senator, every congressman on every show. They should have been doing this from day one and say, look, they're gonna double your premium. They're gonna double your premium. They just cut SNAP. They just cut SNAP, and they did it for their donors. They did it for this company. They did it for that company. They did it for the health insurance companies, and they're screwing you over, right? Until pressure builds, and it was working because the Republicans just got their asses handed to them in an election. If you can't hold strong after they lose every election in a cycle, it's a small cycle, but they literally lost every one of them, right? So if that's at your maximum leverage, so that's when you need to finish the job and get your point across and make sure that everyone in the country knows it's the Republicans that are doubling your premium and cutting your SNAP. And instead of taking on that media battle at the perfect time, at maximum leverage, they said, even if we have maximum leverage, we're gonna surrender anyway because we don't work for you. We work for the donors and we work for the stock market. And now people are all beginning to find out because the walls have been breached. And that's why people are so angry at them. Whereas before, a lot of the lib pundits would have been doing CYA right now. They would have been covering Schumer's ass and these 8 asses, and they would have had all the blankets ready for their asses. Now they're like, oh no, the voters found out. You see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. I think the strongest point you're making is the point about making your case to the media, doing it forcefully. The problem is, the Democratic Party, especially in the Senate, is full of, people who are too old, not effective communicators, and they haven't done a good job with that messaging. Look, my feelings about this are mixed, clearly. Like, I would love to see a Democratic Party that fights more effectively. At the same time, I hate seeing people suffer, especially as we get closer to the holidays. But we're curious what you think, so leave us a comment in the comment section, because I'm very curious to see what our audience thinks about it.
Be with you.
I wanted to bring you on because I wanted to get your take on this. What's happening? The shutdown, it seems to be over. It seems that they have struck a deal in the Senate to end this shutdown. So this is from USA Today. Now, some Democrats have signaled new support for reopening the government. Congress has to clear a number of procedural hurdles when the new funding deal passes the Senate, which could come as soon as today. That if you're watching this video on Tuesday, it's supposed to be today. The package will then have to pass the House of Representatives, which hasn't taken a vote in weeks, which it will pass the House of Representatives because it's run by Republicans. Lawmakers in the House have been put on a 36-hour return notice, so it would likely take several days, barring any travel issues, lawmakers might, for them to pass. So if the Senate passes this, which looks like they're going to, they have the votes. As of this recording, it hasn't happened yet, right? It hasn't happened yet, right? No.
I'll look too.
And then it has to go to the House. So, but the House isn't in session, so they have to get everybody back into Washington, D.C., which might take a couple days. So I don't know. What are we looking at? Wednesday, Thursday? The agreement would reverse Trump's recent firings of federal workers during the shutdown, but the president suggested he's fine with that. I'd abide by the deal. The deal's very good, Trump says. Really? Okay. So what's in the deal? The agreed to deal would reopen the government until January 30th. That's it. So it doesn't even get us 3 months. 2.5 months of government.
Huh.
It would also include a full year funding for several agencies and programs. That's including food aid, veterans benefits, SNAP funding would continue through September at higher levels.
You know, Jimmy, I just see here the Senate is taking a series of procedural votes aimed at finalizing the deal between Republicans and Democrats that would end the government shutdown, teeing up a final vote later Monday night.
So tonight, okay. It also includes a commitment to vote on a bill to potentially extend expiring Obamacare subsidies. So I just want to, before we go any further, I want to, spoiler alert, the Democrats have caved, just in case you don't know. That this is called the Democrats caving. So the tax credits, which millions of Americans rely on for helping paying premiums, have been the issue at the center of the shutdown fight. So they have tax credits. So people who work, who can't afford health insurance in America, because we pay 100% more for our health care than every place else in the world, 100% more. That's what we pay. This is our private system. And people can't afford it. So people get these tax credits and they get subsidies to help them buy their health insurance. So it's basically just a giveaway to health insurance companies. It's welfare for the health insurance companies via giving people health insurance. In addition, so what they're going to do is they're going to have a vote on it. So they're going to vote on a bill to extend those subsidies so people can buy health insurance. They're just going to have, they're not promised. The Democrats didn't win. The Democrats didn't get them to promise to reinstate so in addition, the deal will reverse the layoffs of thousands of federal workers while barring any potential firings until January 30th. The terminations have been temporarily blocked by a federal court. Now, Democrats are not, so they just had their big victory last Tuesday. And a lot of it became from the fact that the voters blame the Republicans for the government shutdown and for a lot of things, but that's definitely what they're getting blamed for. And so that helped the Democrats have a big landslide election last Tuesday. And so they've taken all that momentum and all that, and they threw it away. It's all gone. And Democrats are upset about this. Even Gavin Newsom, he tweeted this out, pathetic. So and That's not just him spitballing his future campaign slogans. That's his reaction to the Democrats caving. Here's another Democrat, Mark Warner, a senator, Democrat from Virginia. He says, I cannot support a deal that still leaves millions of Americans wondering how they are going to pay for their health care or whether they will be able to afford to get sick. Most Senate Democrats opposed reopening the government without extending subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, which are set to expire December 31st. Open enrollment began November 1st, and premiums are projected to double for participants if subsidies aren't extended. About 22 million of the 24 million participants receives, so 24 million people get their health care through the Obamacare thing. 22 of those million get subsidies. And I wonder how many million of them are MAGA, have voted for Trump. As Steve Bannon said on this show, you can't take a meat cleaver to cutting healthcare. You got to do it with the scalpel because there's lots of MAGA on Medicaid, Medicare, and these subsidies. The compromise to end the shutdown commits to a Senate vote in December to extend the tax credit. So they're going to vote in December about the healthcare. So they're not even going to vote. So it's going to come in a while. But approval is not assured. In fact, it's probably not going to happen. Many Republicans oppose extending the subsidies without overhauling the entire program. But not one Republican has submitted a new health care plan, as far as I know. I haven't heard. Where's the Republican health care plan? Marjorie Taylor Greene is screaming about, where's the Republican health care plan? My kids can't afford their health insurance premium. Marjorie Taylor Greene says her health insurance premium is more than her mortgage. Democrats have criticized Republicans for opposing Obamacare without offering their own option. That's what I just said. Now is their chance, said Jeffries. Here's my final slide. Linda Lowell, a Democrat voter from rural Virginia, called a vote by the few Democrats, including Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, to end the government shutdown without a guaranteed extension of healthcare subsidies, a drop. And so what she's saying, what the Democrats are doing by voting to open the government without getting a guarantee for the health care subsidies for working Americans, she says this is a drop in the ocean of disappointment that she feels with the Democrats. Well, and you know what? A drop in the ocean of disappointment is also how Tim Kaine refers to his orgasms. But too many people are suffering. The point has been made that it's the Republicans who did it, and now I think the Republicans are just going to have to wear the loss of the ACA credits and the fiasco over SNAP, she said. Okay, so before I bring in Nick, I'll just give you my take on this, is that the Democrats really gave a gut punch to their base because the base felt like they were winning. They were actually had some leverage against the Republicans over this shutdown and the healthcare benefits. And that's why they swept the elections on Tuesday. And within a week, the Democrats caved. Within a week, the Democrats caved. They caved. They completely caved. And now you're probably not going to get those benefits. But let me just ask you, Nick, here's my thought, is that the Democrats decided we got our electoral victory on last Tuesday. And now we can go ahead and cave because people are going to blame that when time comes in next November for the midterms, people will blame the Republicans when they lose their health care, which they're going to. So the Democrats looked at it as a win-win. We won on Tuesday. Now we can cave. And then the Republicans will be blamed for cutting their health care. And so it's a win-win for the Democrats. That's how I see it. And by the way, they both work for the same people. So this is all theater. Over to you, Nick. What do you say?
Yeah, they essentially was like, thank you for the vote, suckers.
Yes. Thanks for voting.
Yeah, thanks for the vote, suckers. And now you guys are on your own. People really thought that the Democratic Party was going to fight for them because of the No Kings rally. They thought that the Democratic Party was on their side because of that. No, this is the same political theater. And you notice they have different rotating villains this time, right, Jimmy? The senators who are not up for re-election into 2028, some 2030. They strategically picked the Democrats they knew wouldn't be up for re-election to be the one who vote no, which is why trying to change the Democratic Party is a fool's errand because they can always change someone to be a rotating villain whenever they need to. Now, regarding this shutdown, you have to ask, what was the 40 days for? Because it was the same deal that the Republican Party offered. This was all about squeezing the American working class so they are more likely to accept the demands set forward by the ruling class. This is what they do every single lockdown. They use lockdown as a way to implement austerity. It's a political show that always had the same end. This is how it was always going to end.
So this is so that's the question that Democratic voters are like, well, this is the same deal that you could have got 40 days ago. Why did you make us starve for a month without our SNAP payments or without our government job payments, without paying air traffic controllers? Why did you do this for? Well, my theory on this is they wanted to do it so they could get this election, these electoral wins on Tuesday, and then completely sell out, because that's what. So they're it's the same deal they could have gotten 40 days ago. So now, what do you say about my theory that the Democrats decided that they're going to win on this either way, because they're going to people are going to blame the Republicans for cutting their health care. So the Democrats are almost kind of happy that it's happening because it's a win-win for them.
Yeah, man, that's exactly what the Democratic Party wanted to do, and it show how they're one of the most effective evil. Because think how disgusting that is. They want to put so many Americans through pain to solve a problem that you guys could have solved when you was in government, fighting for healthcare, like the whole subsidies for Obamacare, essentially government paying insurance companies to jack up their profits. Even though they still keep prices high, they still deny people. This is a problem that you guys could have solved when in government, but instead of solving it with policy, they try to shut the government down and they try to squeeze Donald Trump and hurt the American working class for political victory. It's a horrible strategy. And now Democrats are talking about the cost of healthcare under Donald Trump, but this has been a problem with the American working class. This was a problem under Joe Biden. We have record amount of Americans that were going through medical debt under Joe Biden, but Democrats did nothing to solve the problem then. So it's Democrats only caring about stuff when Republican is in charge, and their strategy of doing this is actually designed to implement the most pain, the same way like their immigration policy. The Democrats always do this. They inflict the most pain with their incoherent immigration policy in order to win over Latino votes. So people see how under Donald Trump, there's less border crossings, for example, because at least the Republican Party is coherent. They essentially tell people, don't come to the United States or we will mess you up. Meanwhile, the Democrats, in order to win over Latino voters, they pretend to be pro-immigrant, and then when people get here, they lock them in cages. They lock their kids in cages and deport them. That's the mechanism why they end up deporting more people than the Republican Party. It's an inherently more cruel policy than what the Republicans advocate for. The same with the lockdown and their healthcare policy.
So, how do you see this all ending up? I mean, that vote they're going to take on extending the subsidies in December, they're not going to vote to extend the subsidies, correct?
Nope. And Donald Trump wouldn't even sign any legislation anyway. This was designed as political theater to get Americans to accept the idea that their healthcare costs will go up. This is the same thing they do with every single political shutdown. It's used to squeeze the American working class and to get them to accept less. So this is going to end horrifically. It's going to lead to more medical debt. I don't have health care. I have many people in my family that doesn't have health care. The system is falling apart. And the ruling class, I explain this all the time, they don't have any bailout plans, guys. Their plan is to build a police state to hide in their bunkers. As our economy falls apart, Donald Trump is planning to spend $1 trillion on the military, to spend more on Israel, to bail out their libertarian project in Argentina. They don't have a backup plan. This is why I advocate people to get serious about mutual aid societies, us coming together, because There's no end game. They will squeeze the working class until the working class start to push back. And as I see it right now, the working class is too obsessed with culture wars to get their act together. They get too distracted with new shiny objects like random Democrat mayors, for example, to actually get revolutionary. So they will continue to squeeze the working class with these political theater acts until people get their act together.
Once working class people who voted for Donald Trump see their health care premiums double, it will be a bloodbath for the Republicans in November. I don't really understand. I really don't get what they actually get out of doing this, except, some portions of their base get a kick out of kicking, punching down. I always say, if you find yourself angry at someone lower on the economic ladder than you, good chance you're being manipulated by someone higher on the economic ladder than you. And that's exactly what's been happening with SNAP. People are punching down at people who need food stamps. People are punching down at people who need credits and subsidies just to afford health insurance in our country, people who work. And at the same time, Donald Trump is giving $1 trillion to weapons manufacturers, $40 billion to the Libertarian Project in Argentina, hundreds of billions of dollars still funding the Ukraine, $34 billion to Israel, and how many billions of dollars they're spending on this Venezuela war. And now they're building a new military base in Damascus in Syria. Did you know that? So now Syria, Qaeda, Israel, and the United States are all working together. Isn't that something? So I don't know how much it takes for people to feel like a chump, but I certainly do. And now Donald Trump is welcoming to the White House the Al-Qaeda leader. As people are freaked out about Mandami might do a rent freeze, Donald Trump, oh my God, Mandami, he's a Muslim. He's going to be a terrorist. Oh, Donald Trump literally welcoming the head of Al-Qaeda at the White House with open arms. They're all working together because they've always been working together. Why do you think Al-Qaeda and ISIS never attack Israel? It's because they've always been working together and working for us. And we need Al-Qaeda and ISIS so we could go in and bomb Somalia, so we could bomb Yemen, so we could bomb Iraq, so we can bomb Libya, so we can bomb Syria. We always say it's terrorism. And so that, anyway, I'm getting a little bit off track here, but they've always got money for bombs. They got no money for your health care. It's amazing. They got $40 billion for Argentina. What the hell is Argentina for? Nothing. That's welfare to Donald Trump's billionaire backers because they invested in Argentina. That's what this is about. And by the way, George Soros, too, his hedge fund. But anyway, go ahead, Nick. Take it where you want.
Yeah, that's why this is an amazing opportunity for us, because I've been telling people who vote for Donald Trump, what has Donald Trump built for the working class, Jimmy? What has he actually accomplished? What has he done for the poor white working class? Donald Trump has done nothing but put Israel first. He has abandoned the American working class. Now is the best time for us to build this third-party, anti-duopoly, anti-Zionist movement, because Donald Trump is teaming up with big tech. He teamed up with big tech to fight against the ICC. He's not doing anything for the American working class. You guys know that they're on YouTube, Instagram, X, they are deleting evidence of Israeli war crimes. And one of the reasons they are doing that is because Donald Trump put sanctions on the ICC, and he put in pressure on the capitalist class in order to comply with their sanctions. So we're seeing criminals getting away with heinous acts under Donald Trump. And that is his focus, protecting Benjamin Netanyahu from war crime charges, protecting Javier Milei in Argentina. They put the American working class last. Now many people in MAGA are starting to realize it. That's why we are seeing a record amount of people that are supportive of third parties. That's why they need as many electoral distractions as possible. That's why they allow Zohran Mamdani to win in the first place. They needed someone to lure people back into the Democratic Party after the Democratic Party committed genocide. And after the Democratic Party committed genocide, and they was weaker than they ever been, what does Donald Trump do? He immediately gets in charge, and he started hiding from the Epstein files and protecting pedophiles and immediately betraying his base in the most blatant way possible, because I warned Trump supporters that he's not running for re-election.
That's
So you
right.
guys don't have any mechanism to hold him accountable. So the duopoly is strong when both parties are strong. So when Donald Trump was weak, you had Joe Biden that took office and he broke a rail strike, committed a genocide. Now Trump took charge and now he's protecting pedophiles and betraying the MAGA America First agenda. So the duopoly is successful when both parties are strong. Democrats get a big election win. Democrats cave on this electoral showdown. Our politics is about as raw as the WWE. They got different faces, heels. It's a complete joke.
Wow, well said. Yeah, exactly. And people like Candace Owens has certainly woken up to it. I just covered.
I'm glad.
Yeah, she said when MAGA got fractured, when Donald Trump told us that the Epstein files was a hoax, that was it. That was it right there. It's all over. And then there was the Israeli, that Benjamin Netanyahu's right hand man got caught in a pedo sting in Las Vegas, and then they got him back to Israel so he doesn't have to ever face a judge or go to prison for being a pedo.
Law and order, though, Jimmy.
Zionism's all about pedo. Yeah, he's a law and order president. Yeah, except when it comes to yeah, except when it comes to pedos from Israel, then it's cool. Or war criminals from Israel, then it's super cool. All right, so there you have it. The Democrats. I guess the headline is the Democrats cave again, and that both parties are actually working against you. I guess I think that's it. Because the thing is, you have to. The Democrats are the minority party, right? So as Keaton on Due Dissonance explains, that this is different than the fight when they had about the Build Back Better bill. That was when the Democrats were in the majority, so that was an inter-party fight. They don't have the majority, so this is they at some point they were going to have to cave because nobody's getting their food stamps, nobody's getting paid in the government, and they had to, at some point they were going to cave because they're not the majority, and so they just had to pick when, and so they decided, well, we'll do it 40 days and then we'll cave. And that's exactly what they did. The point is that people were blaming the Republicans for the government shutdown and for the fact that they're going to get screwed on their health care. So the Republicans lost big in that election last Tuesday, and so they were starting to do stupid things. They started to scramble. And here's one. Donald Trump tweeted this out. He said, I am recommending to the Senate Republicans that the hundreds of billions of dollars currently being sent to money-sucking insurance companies in order to save the bad health care provided by Obamacare be sent directly to the people so that they can purchase their own much better health care and have money left over. In other words, take from the big bad insurance companies and give it to the people. So this is them. So this is maybe the dumbest thing Donald Trump has ever said. So what he's saying is we're going to take the money from the big bad insurance companies and give it to the people so that they can buy health insurance from the big bad insurance companies. Does that make any sense to anybody? So they're starting to scramble because they know this is bad for them, and then the Democrats immediately cave on it. Did you see this tweet, Nick?
Yeah. This is the first time I actually see this tweet, but it just shows the incoherence of our ruling class when it comes to healthcare plans. Like, how would this be anywhere near more efficient than providing healthcare at the cost of service, which has been proven by studies, like single-payer healthcare will save money instead of paying like insurance companies subsidies like Obamacare, like the Heritage Healthcare Plan, whatever this atrocity is. Donald Trump is saying he's going to provide a healthcare plan for years and he never has. I think the answer is clear. Like whenever you see polls, like I seen a poll not too long ago, Jimmy, where it shows that 1 out of 4 Republicans support single payer, and you can realize it's a lot. Like 1 out of 4, isn't that a lot? Doesn't it seem like a lot to you, Jimmy? Like if you hear Fox News, they will say, if you listen to Fox News, you would never think that 1, 2, 3 socialists, 1, 2, 3 socialists. That's essentially what the Republican poll on healthcare is. That's a good number for for us, then majority independents is around like 55% of independents, 75% Democrats. Like we are in a perfect position to advocate for the correct position, which is why I have disdain for the Democrats for not solving this problem when they have complete control of government, but using one of the most painful ways to do it, using the government shutdown to negotiate for efficient healthcare, which is not efficient. Like it's been driving me crazy, Jimmy, because it's not even affordable. The Obamacare is not even affordable.
Of course
The
not.
only efficient model is the single payer model. But I haven't seen this tweet to you show me, Jimmy. It just shows just how incoherent and how they have no plans. Even like this night, to me, I don't even think this is a capitalist socialist thing because capitalist societies in Europe provide healthcare. It's just our ruling class is uniquely depraved. But go ahead, Jimmy. They just uniquely unfit to govern and legislate about healthcare.
Nick makes a great point. You know, I was in Sweden, I was in Denmark, I was in Amsterdam, I was in Oslo, Norway. All those places have socialized medicine. All those places have universal. And guess what? We pay 100% more for our healthcare in the United States than they do. And by the way, they're all very happy with their healthcare as opposed to us in the United States. And so, and this just shows you that they have no idea. Donald Trump, when he ran in 2016, promised that he was going to give everybody health care. He promised. He said on 60 Minutes, he says, I know how to negotiate with the hospitals. I'm going to get everybody health care. There's no plan to get everybody health care. Instead, give people money so they can buy health insurance from the same people. Again, it shows you how exactly what Nick says, how incoherent the ruling class is. We pay 100% more for our health care than the rest of the world. And they brainwashed a lot of people in the United States into thinking that Medicare for all is a bad idea. People on Medicare are thrilled when they get on Medicare. People are thrilled. They can't wait to get on Medicare. And so that's why it's ridiculous, our system. And, libertarians say, well, that's because the government is involved in healthcare. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. It was the government that would kick you off your healthcare. Anyway, it's the
Malcolm shared the clip with you.
Overseas must prefer a single payer healthcare program. Doctors hate our incoherent privatized healthcare program because they hate dealing with insurance companies, seeing whether they in network, they're out of network. It's completely chaotic, and it shows that. Like I always say that capitalism is central planning. Like having an Obamacare model, which is a right wing model, is all about government funding insurance companies so they can have they can gain profits with their healthcare insurance coverage, and they still deny people to make sure they still have profits in the healthcare. So how is that a more coherent model than having a system where it's direct? There's no middleman that is jacking up the cost of healthcare like these health insurance vultures, and this is why you see costs in other countries way lower. And that's why doctors much prefer to be under a single payer healthcare. That's why whenever you see the lazy Thomas Massey is great on a lot of issues, but whenever we talk about healthcare, it makes me cringe because he said if you're a doctor under a single payer healthcare system, you're essentially a slave. Meanwhile, doctors prefer it because if you're a doctor, you want to treat people. You don't want profit to get in the way of you treating people. It's like, why would you want a fireman that don't want to save people from fires, who rather deal with it? Like that's the same lazy argument that libertarians make, which is completely absurd to me. But please go ahead, Jimmy.
So, all right, if you'd like to hear me tell jokes about this, come see me in Australia. Come see me in Burbank, California, the day after Thanksgiving. It's a Friday. Most people are off. I'm not. Pottstown, Pennsylvania, December 6th. And then January 11th in Waikiki, Hawaii at the Blue Note Theater. Go to jimmydore.com for links for tickets.
From a technical, the Charlie Kirk murder has, like everything like this in modern times now, led to a plethora of conspiracy theories raging around. And I had Rob O'Neill, who was a Navy SEAL who killed Osama bin Laden on Monday, saying that there were a lot of questions he felt just didn't quite stack up with it. Everything you've seen about the shooter, what happened, the fact it was a single bullet, the way he was able to put together his gun, dismantle his gun, get away, and so on, the weird text messaging with his transitioning boyfriend and so on. What do you make of it all? Do you think there are unanswered questions with this? Does it make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely. There are unanswered questions. It doesn't make sense to me completely. And I think that's why there are conspiracy theories that are popping up around the shooting. The problem is that, like so much of what happens in the real world, there are areas that are protected, areas of information that are not available to the public. So the public doesn't get a full picture. You were just talking about the emergence of new media. Part of the unexpected or possibly unproductive side effect of that new media is that we now know more of what we don't know.
Yes.
Whereas in the past, when we didn't know, we didn't even realize we had a gap of information.
What is the stuff, when you look at that shooting, what's the stuff where you, with your former CIA hat on, go, that's a bit weird?
So first of all, the fact that there's really no significant new information since about September 19th, that's fucking weird, man. Right? Like, how is this so significant that we're having national days of silence for Charlie Kirk? How is it so significant that it's making International Media Day after day, but we can't get new information? We still don't know what the motive was. We're having people like the transgender roommate / lover disappear, and nobody's talking to him, and there doesn't seem to be a large manhunt.
No, I don't think it's an autopsy report yet. I don't think we've had an autopsy.
Exactly. So this is information that doesn't seem unreasonable to share, and yet it's not being shared. So the question becomes why. There's lots of legitimate reasons why it wouldn't be shared yet, but that's not good enough for us with our current appetite.
From a technical point of view about the shooting itself, a 22-year-old who's not military trained to be able to get up on that roof, put together a gun, then dismantle it, fire off one shot with a bolt action rifle that belonged to his grandfather, reportedly, and get away. But to be able to assassinate somebody in that clinical manner, does that seem likely, or is there something we don't know about what this kid was doing before all this?
We look at everything in intelligence through a lens of probability. Anything is a possibility, but what are the probabilities that it played out the way that we're being told? So when I think of his age, and I think about the fact that he grew up in a hunting family, and I think about the fact that he was familiar with that particular weapon, he was familiar with the campus. He had what we call the advantage of area familiarity, area fam. He had all of those benefits that Charlie and Charlie's team did not have. Plus, of course, he had the element of surprise on his side. But when it comes to the technical elements of being able to handle that weapon, I tend to agree more with Rob. It doesn't make sense. How, unless he spent hours in premeditation, assembling and disassembling his gun, he already had his ingress and his egress route planned. He already knew where he was going to stash the weapon. He had a plan to succeed. His dad is the reason his plan to disappear ultimately didn't succeed. And that was obviously a variable he didn't account for. So is it possible that he prepared to the extent that he needed to prepare to run such an effective operation? Yeah, it's possible, but is it probable that he did it alone? It's not really probable that one 22-year-old would be able to figure all of that out.
And to fire one shot and be successful in your mission.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, you can see that he hadn't trained for the shot distance, because while he did shoot Charlie in a fatal location, it's unlikely he was aiming for that specific location. So there are certain elements that highlight he was amateur as a professional killer. A Navy SEAL like Rob wouldn't make a mistake like that. Wouldn't see that tumble and not predict it.
Right. I mean, Rob had a lot of questions, but one of which was just the amount of time it took him, like you said, to assemble and disassemble. He said he didn't think he could do it in the time that they believed this boy did it. And it's interesting because the only equivalent kind of story in the last few years where there are even more unanswered questions is the young person who has tried to assassinate Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
From a similar route, from a similar distance, about whom we seem to know absolutely nothing. I mean, even the guy on the golf course, we know a bit more because he defended himself and everything else. But that original shooter remains just so weird. Like, this kid had no digital footprint, nothing. From a CIA point of view, when you encounter that, where someone tries to assassinate the president of the United States or a very high-profile figure, and when you dig into it, for a young person to have no digital footprint whatsoever, that to me is very, very odd.
Absolutely. There's hidden information there without a doubt. It's funny. My mind worked very similar to yours, Piers, when I started to research the elements that made up the Charlie Kirk assassination. I immediately was triggered to look back at Thomas Crooks, the one who tried to kill Donald Trump when he was on the campaign in Butler, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
The parallels are very, very powerful, very humbling, right? You're talking about similar age groups. You're talking about high levels of intelligence. You're talking about a level of emotional IQ that made them actually well-liked in their community.
Right.
CIA believes that all people are born with a spy secret superpower. For some people, that means they can win deals. For others, they can spot liars. Some can even seduce lovers. I built a free 3-minute test to help reveal to you exactly what your secret hidden superpower is. All you have to do is click on the link in the description below, take the test, and start using your spy superpower to stay ahead of 99% of people.
So no one expected that they would have this killer instinct inside them, and arguably maybe they didn't. They certainly were able to carry out something dangerous, but could they have done it alone? We don't know. But even now, when you research Thomas Crooks, even now, there's still no motive assignment.
There's nothing.
There's still no public information. Now, the person he tried to assassinate, of all the people in the country, if you're trying to kill the president, you should be an open book to the American people, unless there's something you don't want the American people to know.
Well, and of course it goes right back to JFK and the unanswered questions there and everything else. And you know, I've had a lot of people on talking about the JFK files, and you just think, will we ever find out? But do you think we ever will? Will we ever know for sure?
In the world of intelligence, in my experience, when there's something that is damaging to the idea of the American government, the idea of the structure that we have, the specificity of how we carry out our operations, when something is butting up against those areas of information, we'll never know, because it's not in the government's best interest to actually be transparent with the people. It's in the government's best interest to tailor and cultivate what's released, and that includes cultivating and tailoring what isn't released.
I had Oliver Stone on, the filmmaker, with his son last week, talking about the RFK assassination and how he was certain, they've done a documentary about this, he was certain that was a CIA inside job. Did you ever hear anything about that when you were?
The RFK assassination is another interesting example of where information is missing, and what's left doesn't stack up. The pre-2001 CIA, pre-9/11 CIA is a very different beast than the CIA I grew up in. And one of the things that they teach us when we go through our onboarding is how different and kind of Wild West, unsupervised, very reckless that previous CIA was. It was born of the time, at the time it was needed, and it was kind of ignored for 30 years before any significant oversight was applied to it. So could they have been involved? I don't put anything beyond what CIA, without oversight, could have done, especially considering it only falls under the office of the executive, which just implies that at some point in time, it would want to shape the office of the executive. And that is exactly why the JFK assassination is so interesting.
Whenever I interview people like you, the most popular response from viewers is there's no such thing as former CIA. And that even if I say to you, are you still in the CIA? Well, why would you tell me anyway?
It's a very valid point. There is no such thing as former CIA. There's no such thing as retired military. The fact that we served once means that at the drop of a dime, at the call, we will serve again. And I'm not trying to hide that, and I'm not trying to say anything else. But there's a difference between being favorably disposed, dedicated, loyal to the mission versus being controlled by the mission today. And when people say, I think what they're implying is that I'm still part of CIA. I am most certainly not part of CIA. CIA is not my friend. They are very publicly not my friend. I get letters from them all the time reminding me to get off screen because I have no business being on screen. And and threatening me with legal action if I overstep the boundary of my secrecy agreement. So people don't see that part. They just see me on camera.
Your book, they tried to block it for a while. Excuse me. But you finally got it unblocked. What was the kind of stuff which they were objecting to, and how much of that in the end has made the final edit?
Yeah, absolutely. So my book Shadow Cell, that was just released in September. Thankfully, we are a New York Times bestseller. I'm very excited about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. The entire manuscript was finished in 2021 and submitted to CIA in late 2021. And then in 2022, the whole world changed. You had conflicts creep up between the United States and China. You, of course, had Russia invade Ukraine. You had new brinksmanship with Iran and North Korea. And as a result of that, CIA deemed the entire book a classified document from beginning to end. The premise of the story, the operation itself, the individuals involved, even the number of cases. Inside the book, we go through detailed the number of officers that were in our cell, the number of cases that the officers managed. CIA wanted none of it released. They deemed it all classified information. My wife and I understood as former CIA officers what is actually the definition of classified information. And it took us 3 years of kind of legal back and forth with CIA.
And out of interest, for those who you don't really understand this, what is the kind of overarching definition of it?
So the definition of human classified intelligence is that it has to be information that exists on a document that has classification markings. That's what makes it classified. There's this catch-all where they can say, oh, if you take what you said, it implies enough information, but that requires a court to come in and say that the court agrees or disagrees with what CIA is saying. So my wife and I knew that what was in the book was not word for word verbatim off of any classified document. So we knew that it wasn't going to withstand that accusation. But it took us 3 years because CIA went through different directors. CIA has its own political issues. Of course, CIA is a one-way street. You write to them, they may or may not write you back right away. So it was a lot of back and forth that ultimately we only won because we threatened them with a First Amendment lawsuit. And when we threatened a First Amendment lawsuit with a platform of my size online, that was when they decided to come back and say that it's releasable.
Is so repulsive. I have text messages, Megan, calling me an anti-Semite.
It's been so unfair. They were coming after you after Turning Point for, among other things, that you had Dave Smith there. Dave Smith is allowed to criticize Israel. You had both sides. The Israeli side was overrepresented.
Though. No, you're not allowed to. It's even worse than that. My moral character is now being put into question. You and I believe that we're Americans and Americans first, period. End of story. We are citizens of this nation, okay?
That's
and
right.
Israel, we have funded, we have supported. I host a person that I moderate the debate of, right? And I give equal time to Josh Hammer, equal time to a pro-Israel advocate, and my moral character is being put into question. And so I think it's a hyper paranoid, like we're just going to try to, we're going to just stamp out everything type of practice. But it goes to the point where if, for example, if I have less ability sometimes online to criticize the Israeli government about backlash than actual Israelis do.
There's something that's been really bothering me for quite a while now.
People are asking, who was the shooter? Was it Tyler Robinson on the roof? Was it the guy with the palm pistol? Was it the man operating the camera? Was it Brigitte Macron in the trap door? I would say the better question to ask, the easier question, who didn't shoot Charlie Kirk?
It's just too many inconsistencies going on with the story.
Yes. So when he's first spotted on campus, he has different clothing on, and then he changes clothing on the roof. and then changed back into that clothing at some point, so that when he was apprehended, when he was arrested, the clothing matched the clothing he had on before the shooting here at UVU.
I don't think we've been told anything close to the truth, and I genuinely think that this was a government hit. I made a video about this, and I got a bunch of backlash for it, but the more time that's gone by, it just seems like I've been right the entire time. And then the footage comes out of the palm gun guy. What's the palm gun guy, Jesse? Well, the palm gun guy is a member of Charlie's security team, and it does appear that he had a palm gun and fired it at Charlie at point blank range. Here's the footage.
Take a look at this man right here, folks. This is Charlie Kirk's security guy. He appears to have a palm gun in his right hand, and he aims it at Charlie Kirk and squeezes the palm gun, firing off a round directly into Charlie Kirk's neck. I suspect he was aiming center mass. As you can see, folks, in the right fist between the middle finger and the ring finger is the barrel of the palm pistol. You see him squeeze the palm pistol, firing off a round into Charlie Kirk. Pay attention to that right hand. It's going to go down into that left tricep area into a hidden pocket. You can see him stuffing that palm pistol in there. His right hand emerges from under his arm, empty-handed. He then puts his hand on the rail, leaps over the rail, and comes to Charlie Kirk's aid like the good assassin, security guard that he is. This video is from behind the assassin. And as you can see, he lifts his right fist up. That right fist contains the palm pistol with the barrel sticking out between the middle finger and the ring finger. He squeezes the palm pistol, firing off a round. You can even see the bullet and the bow shock swirl. There's the bullet and there's the bow shock swirl, both caught on video, folks.
But essentially, that's what I think happened. And I've talked to people about this. They all think I'm crazy.
Safety teams here. I just heard them say the active shooter, Charlie Kirk, has been shot. Charlie Kirk got hit. Look at what the security detail just said. Which one's here?
But you can see a projectile leave the guy's palm gun, right? Now, this is just a conspiracy theory. Don't take this for fact. I'm just saying it doesn't seem like any of this makes any sense. What it does seem like is a bunch of people teamed up to frame the story to somehow get Nick involved in this and take out like some of the biggest on the right space all at once. You see what's going on with Charlie, and he was leaving the Israeli cause.
Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. Now, I don't like generalizations. Not every Jewish person believes that. But it is true, the Anti-Defamation League was part and parcel with Black Lives Matter. It is true that some of the largest financiers of left-wing anti-white causes have been Jewish Americans. They went all in on woke, and it wasn't just ADL. It was some of the top Jewish organizations in the country are actively being blackmailed. The Epstein playbook is being used on a daily basis. Jeffrey Epstein was not a financier. He was not a hedge fund manager. Jeffrey Epstein was a key player in a multi-decade blackmail operation against the most powerful people on the planet. And is the media totally presenting the truth when it comes to Israel? Just a question, that maybe we shouldn't believe everything the media says. Bibi said, quote, I didn't like how he said this, I'll be honest. You can't be MAGA if you're anti-Israel.
The
Ben,
perception, the legacy media is like owned by the Jews. And
I was going to say, Ben, come on.
Israel.
You Jews own the media, Ben. So, I mean, come on. As you can tell by all the wonderful headlines you guys get. This is the closest thing to the Holocaust any of us have lived through. But the fact is now Bibi and the Israeli hard-right government has a mandate. I got to be careful the way I say this. They're going to try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. I mean, I don't use that term lightly, okay? They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people, okay? And honestly, they have a mandate to go seek justice and revenge. They do. This idea that they need to have a truce or a peace treaty, that's morally crap after you see women and children be burned alive and dragged to the street.
He turned down $150 million. Who turns down $150 million? On top of that, he was in like about just a bunch of different stuff that I don't get demonetized. How do I say it without saying it? That little land that we're not allowed to talk about. Well, he was advocating for those people. He was one of the few people that advocated for Irina Zarutska. That was his last tweet, and I believe it was deleted since. And now you're seeing news articles that Charlie was a big advocate for Israel, but the reality of it was he was leaving the cause because he was being harassed. On top of that, he couldn't keep his donors happy. He was put in an unwinnable position, literally unwinnable. There was no winning. And don't get me started on the Tyler Robinson jumped off the roof, but he assembled the blicky on the roof and then disassembled it and then reassembled it without the tool that was left on the roof and left the towel in the woods. How does that make any sense? Why would he do that? If he was trying to get a quick getaway, why not just leave the weapon behind? Wipe your prints, leave the weapon behind. But instead, somehow, like for the that don't know, all right, for like these type of rifles, you need two type of tools to put it together. One for the scope and one for the barrel. They're two different tools. And one of the tools to assemble the gun was left on the roof behind. So they're telling us that he assembled the gun on the roof, disassembled it, put it in his backpack, which it wouldn't have fit in. It wouldn't have fit. Joe Rogan showed that it wouldn't fit in the backpack.
That's the other thing. They said that he took it apart and then put it back together again. Shut the fuck up. Do you know how much time it would take to do that if you were highly skilled?
To disassemble a gun.
To disassemble a rifle so that you can get it in a backpack. And by the way, not going to fit.
Not going to fit in the backpack.
And then somehow or another reconnects it once he gets off the roof. What?
And then it showed him jumping off the roof. And another inconsistency is, I don't know if you guys have ever been hunting or ever shot a 308 at a deer. The deer explodes. Charlie didn't have an iron neck. And even if his neck was iron, if it was a 308 round, it would have exploded. So what is everybody talking about here? It has to be the guy in the front row. It wasn't a trap door. Another day in life. Then you have Nick, someone I have a giant amount of respect for, saying that it's probably Tyler Robinson that shot him, but there's too many inconsistencies where that makes sense. At least with the palm gun theory, the angles line up, the caliber lines up, the entry wound lines up, at least like on the parts of it in my mind. I'm not like a forensics, I'm not a genius, but to tell he was shot with a 308 round when a lot of us hunt, a lot of us aren't that stupid. And it comes to the point where it's like, hey, we all the internet's controlled. Once you say too much, you get debanked. Like, I'm contemplating even posting the video, but you know, this is gonna sound corny. But I also feel like we were cheated with Charlie because he was one of the advocates of Jesus, right? And he wasn't like an unhinged piece of crap like I am. He mannered and just he presented himself well. And I think that's very unfair. But I do believe that Candace and Nick are very close to this. And I think they're gonna have in their opinion. Did I step on something? Yeah. But I would admit that Candace did look a little bit crazy making all these accusations and then not showing any proof. In my mind, her and Nick are in a lot of danger, and they really need to be watching their back right now. Now, everybody can think I'm crazy, but I'm going to stand on this, and eventually I will be proven right. I think for a second that it wasn't an inside job, and I'm all kind of cool with it. So you have a super bike and you're going through town. You probably won't even hit 6th gear, just a pro tip. Damn, my bike's overheating. My balls are getting hot. Are you kidding me? My balls are...
Go figure. Follow me.